Welcome everybody to the first ever Wayfinders, a video game book club. I'm Bobby, and I'm here with Justin.
Hello.
And our very good friend, Jake. Jake, welcome to Misadventureland and to Wayfinders.
Thank you very much.
Jake, why don't you tell people a little about yourself?
I'm Jake. I have had in the past some level of internet presence, I suppose. I've streamed on Twitch. It's been I think about a year since I last streamed on Twitch, which is mad. Mm-hmm. And I make some video essays and things like that for YouTube.
Yeah.
Again, haven't done it in a while, but you know, getting back into the swing of things.
Well, you're more than just your content, Jake.
In the pipeline.
You're more than just your content. You're more than just your content.
I'm also.
You did very good video essays, by the way. If you want to check those out, make sure you check those out. It goes by the name PlanetRedBeard over on the old internets. So if you want to find him there, but you know, Justin and I have watched Jake since really the pandemic really started, and we started like getting into like the Twitch, watching people on Twitch and making a lot of new friends and great friends on Twitch. And you know, Justin and I, you know, I think people have different strengths, different weaknesses when they're doing game stuff. And we immediately with Jake were like, wow, like Jake is like us.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Whether you find that a good thing or a bad thing, that is up to the people listening. But you know, really, people don't know Jake. Really good knowledge of games and understanding of how games work, and interest more than anything in like more than just kind of like the surface level of what games are, I would say. And you can definitely see that in your video essays for sure. And so when we started talking about bringing other people on and figuring out, you know, shows to do with people we liked and wanted to hang out with, Jake was one of the first people we came up with, and deep diving into a game was really the thing that we really thought would be great to do. And we chose a very small, easy, digestible game for our first game. We chose Elden Ring, which is, you know, obviously a 100+ hour open world RPG with intense combat, intense systems, and a lot to go through and dig through. So in some ways it's the perfect first game for us to do in this scenario. In other ways it was a big bite to take off for the first one. But this show is all about really going in depth on a single game. So I want people to know right before we even start, like, there will be spoilers from moment one to moment end. Like, we are not obviously, if we're talking about a certain area or a certain thing and you know that thing, you've done that thing, you're probably safe. But the conversation isn't going to be like sectioned off and siloed into just like, we're going to talk about Limgrave, but we might be talking Limgrave and go, but you know, when we got to the Altus Plateau, this really paid off, or this really whatever. There's going to be everything's going to be wrapped up in spoilers. If you haven't finished the game, or you care about what happens at the end of the game, or even, you know, NPC side quests, whatever, you probably want to wait till you're done before you really listen and really like partake in this conversation, because I can't promise you that we won't be talking about the beginning of the game and then talk about the end of the game in the next moment. So I just want people to know that. But you know, we're gonna go through the game. You know, we're gonna kind of go area by area in a lot of ways. We're not gonna spend all the same amount of time on every area. We might not spend any time on a certain area, but that's how we're gonna kind of progress this conversation. But before we get to that, I want to start out sort of looking at like the 100-foot view, 1,000-foot view of the game and what we experienced with it. And I want to start out with this, which I think is important for context, but not important to your opinion on whether the game's good or not. What's the Souls experience in the room before we start this? From Software experience, I should say, before we get going here. You know, because there might be people who listen to our stuff probably know Justin and I's, don't know Jake's, but there might be people who listen to this who don't know either, haven't listened to it ever before. So I want to make sure that they know. So for me, I have played all of them. Like, I have not beaten all of them. I will say that right now. But I have played every single one of their, like, since Demon's Souls, I have played at least at least 10 to 20 hours of all of them. And I have completed Demon Souls, the remake, Bloodborne, and this, and Elden Ring, and put a significant amount of time into Dark Souls 1, more than 2/3 through that, and big chunks of Dark Souls 3 and Dark Souls 2 as well. And Sekiro, I put some time into, but it broke me as a human being, so I put that down. Justin, what is your experience with these games?
I have played and beaten both Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. I have put about 10-ish hours into Demon Souls. I have not touched Dark Souls 1 or 2.
Okay.
And I have also played Sekiro, or Sekiro, however we actually say it. And I got up to the first boss, but never actually did the first boss. I wasn't enjoying it enough at the time to like continue going with it. I always thought about coming back to it, and then I watched you stream it and said, actually, no, I'm good.
Jake, what about you?
0. This is the beginning of my FromSoft journey. I obviously, being involved in the talking about video game space, I know what the Soulsborne games are all about. And I have an understanding of their sort of like core systems and things like that, but in terms of like hands-on experience, absolutely none until Elden Ring. So
this is great. There's great range of experiences, and it especially is great because in general, I very much enjoy the games. Justin has sort of like a very love-hate relationship with the games, and you don't have any kind of like preconceived feelings about the games beforehand. So it's a good mix of opinions we've got going in. And that leads me to my next question I think you should start, Jake, because I think this is most interesting since you haven't played the games before. What were your expectations before starting the game? Like, what did you think you were getting into when you started?
I expected a difficult game, but I kind of listened a bit too much to the talk around specifically Elden Ring about its open world and how that how you can go about the open world and gather resources and build yourself up to take on a boss, make the boss easier, kind of things like that. I think I listened to that a little bit too much. I went into it expecting it to be difficult. I didn't anticipate it being as difficult as it was. But we'll get onto that later. I think the thing that I was most excited about it was its open world. I anticipated a big open world with lots of things to do, and that's what we got. So, yeah.
All right, interesting. I would definitely, I think talking about the difficulty piece is definitely a very interesting conversation, because I think it's also something that's very different depending on how many of these games you've played, how intimately you know the systems, how you know sort of like the language that the game is communicating to you, because the game often is communicating something to you, and if you played the games previously, you're more likely to pick up on the thing the game is trying to tell you than if you're coming in, completely fresh to the world and to how From sort of tells stories, Obviously, I was really excited for the game. One of my favorite developers and made one of my favorite games of all time in Bloodborne. So definitely very excited. Funny, the thing for me, and it's gonna be really funny when we get into like breaking down like what our builds were and how long it took us to play the game and all that kind of stuff. The thing that I was expecting to like the game a lot, love it probably. And before we decided to do this show, I was like, but I might not finish it. Was really in my head like what I was thinking, because for a lot of their games, I don't finish them. Like I hit a wall at a certain point, and I don't get like other than Sekiro, I don't get to a point where I'm like, oh, I just can't do this. A lot of times I'm just like, I've gotten what I wanted out of this game. I feel satisfied with what I've done. I had a good time. I beat a couple of bosses. It was really fun, whatever like that. But I'm just good for now. And especially with big open world games, I am not the kind of person who finishes a lot of those games. It takes a very special game for me to finish it. So my initial expectation was I'm gonna love this, and then I'm probably not gonna finish it. When we decided to do this, I was like, well, I'm definitely gonna finish it now because we're gonna talk about it. But that was my expectation, kind of going in beforehand. Justin, what about you?
I was going in with an open mind. As you heard before, I have a love-hate relationship with these games, and the things that we had heard about this game pre-release, like that, I think they've released like that 15-minute video, maybe like 2 months before the game came out, which showed like, hey, like this is way more open, and it looked like cooperative play was more of a thing. And when I sat down to play it, I went in being like, okay, like I'm going to treat this game differently than I treat their other games, which is I'm not going to let myself get overly frustrated by anything. And I'm going to, if I hit a wall, be able to do what I can't do in games like Bloodborne or Dark Souls 3, which is turn around and walk and do a different direction. Like go and see what else is out there, and then come back and maybe, like Jake said, like take another run on the boss as you've leveled up some. And that was my mindset going in, and that's the mindset I held firm throughout the game, and I really ended up enjoying it because of that.
Nice. Yeah. So we kind of set the stage for our experience coming in whenever we all started, because this could change obviously partly through the game. What was like the build or the kind of character that you were kind of like looking to sit out with, Jake? Like, what did you start out with? Like, not necessarily the starting class. Like, I know I can't remember. I think I started with a confessor, but like there's like 8 of them. It doesn't really matter, right? It's like it's just a starting stats for you. But what were you trying to build into? Like, did you want to be a big strong boy with a shield? Did you want to be a magic boy? Like, what was your path?
It was pretty consistent throughout most of the game. I started so my starting class was the astrologer, and I kind of stuck with that throughout most of the game. So I was using a staff at pretty much the entire game, and then varying different types of swords. So it started with the starter sword, which is just a standard one-handed sword, and then later in the game it kind of shifted so that I was using the sword a little bit more. Because I found a sword, I think it's just called the crystal sword, I'm not sure. Which scales with intelligence, so that worked with the build. So then I was doing a bit more melee. There were times where I was entirely just two-handing a staff and just throwing magic at people and just being like, this is great. This is easy. and then later into the game, I got the what's it called? The Dark Moon Greatsword, and that again scales with intelligence, and it has a really cool R2.
Yeah, it does.
And that's so it was pretty consistently a heavily focused on intelligence build.
Okay.
Lots of magic, but it kind of shifted a little bit here and there, but fairly consistent throughout most of the game.
Nice. Okay, cool. Justin, what about you?
So I have almost always played these games as a get up in your face and slash you boy. So that didn't change for me this time. Even though I was tempted by playing a magic class, I ended up picking a samurai because I like blood loss. That sounds fun. Blood loss is apparently insanely broken in this game, and it is what everybody leans on to beat the game. I did not know that going in. So I ended up picking a samurai, and really I used that starting samurai katana that you get all the way until the back third of the game. And yeah, like the back, I'll say last 15 to 20% of the game, I was like, okay, I found a different weapon. Still a katana, but yeah, my starting weapon was like plus 25 at a certain point. So yeah, that's what I was.
Nice. So for me, you two have sound very consistent. I was all over the place. So I started out with the confessor like thing. So I was like, okay, I generally like faith builds in the games because they're kind of weird, but they can be like get pretty powerful. Those builds make it tough for the opening parts of the game, because you have magic, but it's not magic at the range of an intelligence magic, and you're kind of strong, but not as strong as if you were going, into a pure strength or pure dex, build. So I was doing kind of like a faith dex build, and I was progressing with it. I got this like cool scythe, this winged scythe, where it would do like a double hit and it would do holy damage, and it was working pretty well. But at a certain time I was like, you know what? Like this is going fine, but like it's not exactly what I want. So I respect deeply into intelligence. And I was using a staff, and I was using the Sword of Night and Flame. That was great for a while, because sometimes, magic really allows you to approach things in a way that's like on your terms a lot of the time. You don't have to get up right in their faces. You can sort of decide, like, I'm just gonna, ting, 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 ting a little bit, and kind of like feel your way into an area. And that worked for me great until I hit a stopping point with a certain boss where I was like, this is not working for me. And then I respect again into blood loss. And I just went into like full blood loss mode. 2 katanas, one of which is like the Rivers of Blood one that Justin is also talking about, which is like, does a crazy amount of bleed damage, plus another sword in my other hand that was also doing bleed damage, and talismans and masks that were all bleed specific, and that got me through the end of the game. I did also do a second playthrough of the game where I played a pure strength boy, like a sword bigger than my whole entire body. Two-handing it, crazy high strength, crazy high endurance, like insane amount of damage. And that was fun. It was a very different experience, because I had to really be up in their faces, and you had to be willing to take a lot of damage, is really kind of what it really is. You got to be able to take damage to give damage. But it was a fun experience, though. I would say it was really fun to be able to like break the poise of like Crucible Knights, where I was like terrified of them before, but I do like 2 of this one move and I would just break their poise. So that was fun. So yeah, I respect a few times in my first playthrough, and then in my second playthrough I just went full strength the whole time through. Quickly, I just want to ask, like, for me personally, I summoned in my first playthrough, especially, I summoned a few times. I summoned some cooperators, like randos and friends, to help me through a couple of different fights that I just was kind of I kind of. For me with these games, if we're going to set the expectation for me and how I deal with these games, I don't have much ego wrapped up in like, I did it myself. I don't have that in these games. I don't think there's anything wrong with having that, but I don't have that in these games. So if I fight the boss enough times, I'm like, okay, I've seen the boss, I've done the thing. Like if I bangs my head for another like hour against this thing, I could probably do it. But you know what? I'd rather just like call somebody in and get through this, because this is not my end all be all is beating this boss. So I summoned real people in a few times. Whenever there was an NPC summon, I usually brought them in, because usually it was like either it pulled aggro, but also it was usually kind of like story, something with like an NPC quest line or something. And I liked having those people come in, and I used a wiki a bunch. Whenever I was like, what do I need for this? I would go to a wiki and do that. So that's kind of how I worked it. And of course, I used the Spirit Ashes. I know some people do this and don't use Spirit Ashes. I don't think that's any of us.
No.
Use the Spirit Ashes stuff. And I used the Mimic.
I used my Spirit Ashes.
Yeah, I used the Mimic tier a lot, and I used Black Knife Tish. Those are the 2 that I used the most in my first playthrough. Jake, what about you? Like those things? Did you summon people? Did what did you do?
I didn't summon any real people, just because I couldn't work out the co-op systems for summoning like strangers. I just couldn't work it out, and whenever I can't remember what the name of the item is, but the item that you can use to ping all of the various summoning what they called the summoning bits on the floor. I can't remember
the summoning pools and stuff like that. The summoning signs. The finger culling remedy.
Yeah. I could never see any like real people to summon. I don't know if it was just because there weren't any at that particular time, or if it was a connection issue, because I had a fair few connection issues.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so no real people. I don't think at any point. Also, I didn't know anyone else that was playing on PC. I know that you guys were playing on Were you guys playing on PlayStation?
Xbox. We were playing on Xbox.
Xbox. Okay. And yeah, all of my other friends were playing on PlayStation. So yeah, I didn't have anyone that I could just send a text to, being like, "I'm getting pancake, come and help me." But yes, I use the wiki a lot because there are some quests in this game that it'll give you the information, but you really have to look for it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the first time that I've been like this. I feel like this is how the game is kind of. It's a community effort. I feel a lot of this. It's so massive,
Absolutely,
and there's so many intricate little parts that you should never feel guilty. I mean, you should never feel guilty for using wiki anyway, but particularly with this game because there's just so much.
Yeah.
And so much stuff that's just intentionally hidden.
Yeah.
That
these games are designed purposely for that community to exist and to for people to help each other. It's sort of like the out of game version of the summoning signs and summoning pools and stuff like that, you know? Which is why it's so weird that people like. I think a lot of the problems with some people getting into these games, right, is like the fan base of the games who seem to have like this, like, you gotta get good. Like, if you're summoning people, you're not doing it right. When it's abundantly clear the designers of the game don't feel that way, right? Like they put that stuff in the game. It's in the game, and it's not something that they shame you for using. You don't not get a trophy if you summon somebody to beat a boss. You know, so like it's the game is very meant to be a communal experience in a lot of ways. What were the spirit ashes that you used mainly, Jake?
And until the point of getting the mimic tier, I used the wolves. I can't remember. It's like 5 wolves at this point.
Yeah.
And then it was pretty much mimic tier until the end of the game. I experimented with a few, but most of the time I would forget to level them up and then bring them in, and then they would get flattened, and then I would be like, I need to level them up, and then I would level them up, and I would just run out of resources, so I can do it again. So I pretty much stuck with the mimic tier.
Nice
for the majority.
Yeah. Mimic tier is great. I wish I had gotten to experience it before they originally nerfed it, because they like the day I got it in the game was the day I got it and I signed off, and then they were like, "Oh, the patch is out. They nerfed the mimic tier." I was like, no, I just wanted to use it once when it was like uber powerful. There was also a time where I was using the Sword of Night and Flame, and they nerfed that at that time as well. And I was like, well, okay. Justin, what did you, I mean, I know, but what did you end up using? And the other thing, did you summon people? Did you use a wiki? What spirit ashes did you use? Those kind of things.
I did use a wiki for looking for specific bleed items at the end of the game. Otherwise, I relied on you to be my wiki, because the way we played this game was you, me, and another friends would just get into a party together and just talk, you know, like and talk about what we were doing. It was just a lot of under the breath cursing and you know, trying not to spoil what was happening, because at a certain point, I was close to where you were, and then you just blew past me at a certain point. Not being able to play for a week because of having surgery really put me behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
But you know, there are certain things in there that, like, look, I just would not figure out. One of my greatest failings with these games is I am actually pretty good when it comes to like the combat. Like I'm actually pretty good at that. I am awful at reading comprehension, understanding what the game is trying to tell me, and remembering the name of fucking anything. So when it gives me an item and it's like, go back to that place, I'm like, I have no idea where that place was, because all of my focus when I enter an area is on surviving, and that's it. I don't remember what the names are. I don't remember what the names of bosses are, or enemies, or NPCs, or anybody. So I would rely on Bobby I'd be like, I got this thing, I don't know what the fuck to do with it. And you'd be like, go back to that place that looks like this. Oh, okay, I'll go back there. I summoned once because we wanted to see what it was like. I wanted to at least, while we were having this conversation, I wanted to see what the whole process was like. And I summoned to get a specific item in a dungeon, in a cave.
Yeah. Earlier than you were supposed to get it. Yeah,
supposed
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was probably I probably got the golden scarab maybe 5 to 10 hours earlier than I should have gotten it in the game. Because I was over in the lake. I was in Lorena,
Lernia. I think it's Lernia. I think that's how you're supposed to say it. I always say it. I always say it different ways every time I say it, but I think that's what
I needed to get to Caelid to get to the Golden Scarab. And that place is a nightmare zone when you're like, I think it's the first real nightmare zone of the game, and we'll get into locations later. But I wanted to get that Golden Scarab, and doing so put me on a path of just sheer leveling might. But yeah, I that was like the one time I summoned. And I did all the bosses on my own. I would use my mimic. I mean, I don't want to jump around too much, but I think the Spirit Ashes are what make this game more different than any of the other games that they've had. And I would be very upset in the next From Software game if there is not Spirit Ashes in there to use, because I found them to be just so helpful. Coming from other From Software games, those Spirit Ashes are literally a lifesaver. When you would actually, in that party here, all of us at one point yell, "Can you please draw his aggro? Please, can you draw his aggro? Can you just get in the fight?" I used Mimic Tear a lot until I went and I got Tish probably a little bit also too early. I was not ready for that fight, and that was the one of the fights where I disobeyed my own rule and said, I'm going to do this right here and right now because he's hiding in an Everjail, and I would not remember what Everjail it was when I went back to look for it later. So I remember probably spent about 45 minutes.
Yeah, we were in the party together, and I was like, Justin was like, "Is this worth it?" And I was like, "It's worth it." It's like the summon is very, very good. And what was it worth
lying.
it? Yeah,
yeah, it was completely worth it. I mean, Jake, when we were talking and we were asking what summons you were using, and you had passed the point where Tish was, and I was like, "No, you should go back and get Tish."
Yeah,
like,
I did actually go
unbelievably nasty.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I got through the game.
Yeah. And what did we end up with? Again, this is a little different, Justin and I, because we played a little bit past when we actually finished the game. Both of us like cleaned up some trophies and stuff like that and stuff. But for my first character, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. I think I was around level 160 when I finished the game, and I think it was like 105 hours or something like that, I think is what I ended up with. Right now that character is at level 171 and it's 118 hours in, but I cleaned up a bunch of stuff. I beat a bunch of bosses I hadn't beaten before. I've helped our friend, we were talking about our other friend Andy a lot. Like we kind of gone into areas and boss fights together with that character. And then my second character was level 119 when I finished, and I did that in 34 hours. So, when you know the game, it's a lot easier. It goes a lot faster, especially when you're not doing, like I wasn't exploring that much. I was basically going like, looking at a wiki going like, what do I need for a good strength build? And then just like basically seeking those things out and then just pushing constantly forward. And the game is built in a way, and we'll get this later, where you can skip a lot of stuff, and get ahead of areas very fast to get certain items. Justin, what did you end up at?
When I finished the game, it was at 87 hours and I was level 174.
Just insane.
My character, I went back in the next day and I think I cleaned up like 3 bosses. So probably I would say like 88 hours, level 175 or 6.
Okay.
Before I basically, I've gone back in there and spent more time. So I'm probably like plus 90 now, but it's mostly been helping Andy and trying to, get through the game. But it's not like I've been doing anything else.
Yeah. Jake, what about you?
I got to level, I'm just checking my notes to make sure I do have it right. Yeah, 126 with 106 hours.
Okay, all right. So,
yeah.
You're very similar to our other friend Andy is like Summers is in that zone, like as far as like hours to level, like like percentages. All right, so that's good. I think that's a good like over like 100,000 view of like kind of what our processes were and what our strategies were and what our builds were. So as we get into these different areas and different things, I think it'll like people can know like kind of how we're approaching these things. So let's just start. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with Limgrave. It's the opening area of the game, and for me, well, I don't think it's not my favorite area of the game. I think it's one of the best. I think it's a fantastic starting area with a ton of stuff to do. You know, but Jake, I'm really curious for you. Like, this is your first Souls game. You're walking out into this giant world. You know, what was your experience sort of in those opening hours of Elden Ring and getting out into that world?
So my first, I'd say like 5 to 8 hours or so. It was actually pretty rough. I was obviously getting used to the combat, which is there's no kind of outside of the kind of Soulsborne genre of games. This sort of combat is not that common.
Yeah.
In the sense that, like, at the beginning of the game, it takes like a few hits to kill an enemy, but they will just one hit you.
Yeah.
And I think it was the section, and obviously when you go to a site of grace, with the first few, it points you in a direction. So I followed that direction, and then you get to the gate at the bottom of just kind of before you go towards Stormville Castle, and the giant drops down.
Yeah.
And I attempted that giant so many times, being like, I need to beat this guy to get through here. And realizing you absolutely do not need to beat that guy to get through there. You can just run past.
Yeah.
Like learning about how these games work.
Yeah.
So that was tough. But I think it was good for me to sort of like have that sort of like really, really rough kind of like banging my head against the wall kind of situation that early on, because the game, I think Limgrave is a really great area for teaching you that that's not how you play this game. You don't need to bang your head against the wall over and over again until you see the cracks. I think that was an expression that I saw someone use, and I thought that was great. The whole point is that you can just walk around, or you can go to the million different dungeons that there are in Limgrave, level up, go back, and absolutely flatten the guy.
Yeah.
And I think it teaches you that from the very start. You know, like, you go out and you see the tree sentinel, and you know, a lot of people, because they see this big shiny gold guy, it's like, oh, that's the first proper boss of the game, and then he'll just flatten you, and it's like, oh, maybe that's not the first boss of the game. You know, and that happens so regularly throughout the game that it kind of like forces you to think in a completely different way than you usually would.
Yeah.
In video games, like like a lot of open worlds, despite them being open worlds, they're still fairly linear. Whereas this, it's not. It'll point you in a linear direction, but you'll realize that if you go in that linear direction, you'll probably have a pretty rough time. Yeah. So you need to explore everything and then maybe follow that direction. But you know, you don't even have to do that. Yeah. So yeah, the very first few hours were a tough time, but then you got into the swing of things, started sort of like getting a feel for the mechanics, like how I wanted to build my character and like the sort of different characteristics of the different enemies and various bosses, and then I started to have just a really, really good time. It was very, very fun for a while. Like even in a frustrating boss fight where you die like 5 or 6 times before beating the thing, you can see what you're doing wrong, and you're kind of learning constantly. And I think that was great. It being my first Souls game, I think that was probably, if I'm going to go and play the others now, which I probably will, I think learning from this was probably, I feel might have been the best way to do it. I feel like, I don't know, you guys having experience in the Souls games, I don't know, but it feels like a good first, even specifically just playing the Limgrave area, feels like a good first Soulsborne experience.
Yeah, Justin, what do you think about that?
You know, it's funny. I think Limgrave is a really great area. I think it's probably, for me, I think the most like dense area for exploration, because it feels like there are those little mini dungeons everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like within the first 5 minutes of walking out of Limgrave, you could choose to go left down to that beach, and then you're going through a tunnel where you come across like a boss, and then now you come out on an island where there is a dragon. You know, like there's like a is there a dragon there? Like
it's a dead dragon. It's that dragon church.
Dead dragon. Yeah. It's
yeah.
Dead Dragon Church.
Yeah.
And like that's within your first like 20 minutes of playing the game.
Yeah.
I also think that Limgrave is also fucking dastardly for new players of these games who don't know what the game is trying to tell you. I think it is more confusing than any of their other games, because there is so much stuff that if you get distracted by this giant open world that you will just not understand and not know. Like, you will not know how to level if you if you only have like a tertiary understanding of what the game is trying to tell you, and you are not following it. If you had like come in with some knowledge, like, oh, those sites of grace are leading me to that first boss, right? But I don't want to do that because obviously I'm not ready for that yet. You might skip figuring out how to level for God knows how long. And if you do not return to that church in the evening, you will miss the fact that you could have those spirit ashes. So like, without that knowledge, you could play 10 hours in that game just wandering in directions without having any way to level and having any spirit ashes. So while I think it's really good, it's a good first area, it can put you behind the 8 ball kind of fast.
Well, I'll say this: the spirit ashes, yes. The leveling thing, I think it's no matter where you are, as soon as you rest, I think 4 times. I think it no matter what fire you're at, she'll pop up and give you the like speech.
But you have to rest at four different ones.
4
right?
different ones, yeah.
Or
But
you have to rest four. Yeah, okay.
4 different ones. It could be any 4 ones. It doesn't have to be on the path up to the castle. So the leveling thing, I think, would happen
to have that.
Yeah. So I think Limgrave is and Jake, hearing you say what you said is really interesting to me because like I think all of our other games, right, are equally as confusing if you're playing them for the first time, but generally there's like one way you have to go, right? So it's just like you might not know how to do something, but you're going to be going the same way, and you're going to start beating your head against something, and you're going to be like, well, okay, like there must be something eventually. If you're trying to invest in the game, you're going to think like, well, there must be something I'm not doing that is supposed to press me forward. And all the games have like some sort of like, you have to do a certain amount of things before you can ever level up. Like in Bloodborne, you have to get to the first boss before you can ever even level your character. Stuff like that. What I think is interesting is I think they were trying to solve for, well, but what if they just walk out the door and they decide to go left or right? Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, there has to be a way we can at least try to get them on the rails, which is why I think those pointed sites of grace that point you towards the castle, like their intention is like, by the time you get to the site of grace that's right before Margit, you will have stopped at 4 sites of grace, and these things will happen naturally, right? And you will walk into Margit, and then you'll die most likely the first time, and then you'll get sent to the Round Table Hold, which is like the hub or whatever it is, right? And I think, Justin, you're absolutely right, though. I think that what happened was, as the game was coming out, before the game came out, there was a lot of reviews and a lot of chatter and a lot of people saying like, you're not gonna be able to beat the first boss. Like right now, you have to go level up. And I think those are well-meaning statements from people who said those statements. But I think it does like make people like triple think like they're the obvious path, which is like the game wants you to go and fail so that it can send you along the way to success. And sometimes I think people do like well, but I read that you weren't supposed to go this way, so I'm just not going to go that way. I'm just going to go this way. And it's what I always say about every open world game, because we had a friend, Jackie, who played Skyrim and literally didn't get like the dragon yell for the first like 40 hours she was playing it because she didn't progress those story quests because she's like, I just want to do all this. I was like, when you play open world games, just do the first couple things they want you to do before you start going crazy, because I'm guarantee you they're going to be giving you something you need. And this game is, although so different from those kind of games, similar in that way. I mean, Limgrave, here's the thing about it. Here's the thing I think is easier about it than a lot of other places. It's way easier than the first opening level of Bloodborne, for sure. There is not like mobs of 15 enemies in a small confined space you have to walk through. But Jake, as you said, you try to fight that tree sentinel, you're going to get flattened. You try to fight Margit at level 10, level 15, you're going to get flattened. Unless you're one of these people who's really great at the games, right? And so I like that and I agree, Justin, it's definitely the most dense. I like that about it. I like how dense it is, and it definitely gives you a lot to do in your opening time. You know, by the time you fought Margit, like, and beat them, Jake, how long do you think you'd put into the game by then?
Probably it was a while. I actually did, like, kind of going back to your point that you were making about following the path to fail and then go back. I as you said, like, I listened to all of the sort of like reviews at the like before the game came out and various things like that about kind of not being able to fight him, and I suffered from that. I didn't find the round table hold for like the first 15 hours just because I didn't even I knew that Margit was there, and I was like, I'm not gonna even touch that, even though you should. But I think, yeah, by the time I actually beat Margit, I think I was level 30 or 40, and I put on about 25 hours. Probably it was a good chunk of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I spent so much time. I think I probably spent more time down in the Weeping Peninsula than I did like the majority of Limgrave. But yeah, it was a while. It was a while. I think just getting used to, you know, a completely new kind of way of sort of playing a video game, it felt like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned that too, Jake, about like it's like very different, right, in combat and in mechanic than other games. How did you what kind of unlocked for you, like, okay, this is how I need to play the game? Like, it was just experience, or did something happen where you're like, oh, wait, no, this is it?
I don't know if there was like one specific point. I think it was just, I think for a good amount of the time it was just use magic as much as you can just to sort of like get through.
Yeah.
But I think realizing that you're not the majority of bosses, you're not going to beat them on the first try, and you have to learn, like, pretty precisely learn their mechanics and their, you know, their patterns and when to dodge, and like being in very specific windows. Most games are fairly lenient, you know, they'll have tough boss fights, but they're, you know, the timing windows for their attacks are fairly lenient, and they're much I think the attacks are signaled in a good way, but they're particularly with like Margit, he'll kind of linger in the air for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
And then suddenly really, really quickly hit.
Yeah.
And that, again, yeah, it's like things like that are things that I'm not so used to, you know. It's just getting timing down. I think that was kind of the main thing for me.
Yeah.
Like dodging precisely. I think
that's one of the things I think that this game does that is so different than all of the other bosses in their previous games. Is their other bosses have wild mechanics, but in this game, it's wild mechanics and unpredictability with when they're going to attack. Like, you know, having an attack keyed up in the air for forever. And then I feel like coming down at different intervals makes it really hard to get a feel for where, you know, when to dodge, when to attack, you know, and it's something that this game does a ton.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
There needs to be an addendum to that list, Bobby, of Bloodborne or Dark Souls bosses. You know, Stomp Jomperson and the gang's all here and they hate you. There needs to be one for I'm going to attack at some point or something like that. It's get ready, it's coming.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah, there's a couple bosses in this, because I think as people have played Souls games before, Jake, I think that mechanic you're speaking about, like, that's not something that has classically been in their games a lot of the times. I think they are constantly trying to do things with their bosses that will also, you know, mess with the people who have a lot of experience playing against these bosses, right? Like in the past, you see a character prime his attack. For the most part, it's time to dodge or roll like then. And it's not this kind of thing where they kind of like hold up their arms and like spin with you for as long, like, and then it was funny because when Justin and I were helping our buddy Andy, we're facing one of the last bosses, and he also has one of those attacks where he kind of like brings his arm up and just kind of like sits there, and I'm watching Justin like roll around. I'm sitting on the outside, and Justin just rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling until he actually does a whole entire circle around the guy, and the guy just brings his hammer down, probably exactly where he was going to do it originally. And Justin's like, I dodged, and I was like, Justin, I watched you do a total circle around him. He's like, he's hands up in the air for so long. I was like, yes, absolutely.
The second I would stop rolling, he would bring it down. So I'm like, I'm just going to keep rolling it. Like, I think the key to a lot of their bosses is never roll away.
Yeah.
Always roll towards or around. Rolling away leads to death.
Yeah.
And it's a lesson that has to get like brutally ingrained into you by dying a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the things that just in general for these games as a whole that sort of helped me get more adept at playing them. Was someone, when I was playing Bloodborne particularly, was like, you need to stop dodging away, like dodge through or to the side, because a lot of the bosses are made to punish you for dodging away, because their attacks are longer than your roll, like speed is. So yeah, but Margit especially, I would say Margit, and they do this a lot, which is that Margit is an amalgamation of all of the things that are going to make the game difficult for you past Margit, right? Like the delayed attacks, the area of effect attacks, the kind of enemies that specifically aggro to you when you're healing, right? Like these are all things. Someone has pulls out a range attack when you get farther away from him, when you're trying to back off. All of these things are things that are going to come up throughout the entire game. And it's basically, Elden Ring saying, you need to learn how to deal with these now, so later you're not getting stuck on as much stuff anymore. And I think it's fighting Margit. Back when I started the game, I was like, man, if this is like the sort of level of boss that's everywhere here, this game is going to be like really, really, really difficult for me. And I think some of the bosses after Margit are much easier than Margit was. But I think it's a really, really good first boss. And a really good example of why you need to use spirit ashes and, if that kind of stuff. I think it gives you all of that stuff in a really interesting way. So I think Margit's a really good boss. I think it's just a very hard boss to kind of start out the game with.
It was especially difficult when you completely assumed there would be an entire other phase of the fight. And
I said, Justin, have you gotten to a second phase yet? And he's like, no. And then you can tell him what happened.
So Bobby, again, is ahead of me. And at that point, I had probably spent like, I don't know, 15, 16 hours in Limgrave, which, I mean, just jumping back really quickly, you could spend the entirety of a Bloodborne playthrough in Limgrave itself, which is just we'll get into it, but the sheer size and scope of this game is something to behold. But, I had taken a couple of runs at Margit, and it was just like, all right, well, I got him down to like a half health or 3/4 health, but there's a whole nother health bar hiding behind this thing. So I was like, I'm just not ready yet. And so I'm like, I would just like go back and like level up some more. And it was late at night too. And we were playing, and I was like, let's just take one more run at him. And so like, I'm like kind of remaining quiet while we're in the party or whatever. And so I get him down, and I'm like, well, fuck. I was like, I got no health files left or whatever. And like, all right, I'll always see what the second phase is. And then it was just like, great enemy felled. And I was like, I beat it? And Bobby's like, did you just no-sell that? I'm like, where's the second health bar? And he's like, no, there isn't a second health bar. It's just he starts doing different attacks. And it was like, I probably could have beaten him 10 levels ago. Which made me excited, because there are few things in the world I hate than when you beat a boss and the boss gets back up with a second health bar. And I hate that. Yeah. And I was like, I was really hoping that I wasn't going to see that at any point in any of these fights. And then there are a few where it's like, yes, I beat. Oh, you motherfucker, stay down. Please stay down.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There's a few of those. So after Margit, right? you get into Stormville Castle, which is like what they call one of their legacy dungeons, which is basically like, Jake, just so you know, obviously you haven't played their games yet. Stormville Castle and stuff like it is basically what the other games are made up of, right? Are these like big labyrinthine dungeons or levels that have, usually 2 bosses in them. Usually they'll have a mid boss and an end boss. And they have a couple different routes
Castle
to go.
is like playing Dark Souls 3. It is basically
yes.
If you lifted it up and put it in Dark Souls 3, you'd be like, okay.
Yeah, that's what they do. Speaking just an overall thing of the game, which is one of the things what I think makes this game so good is that it adds all of this new stuff, great stuff to the Soul sort of like format, but doesn't lose any of the stuff that used to make them great, right? Because Stormville Castle is a great example of like, man, like, oh my God, I can't believe I went down this elevator and then I walked over here and I went over here and now I'm back at this place. Like I opened this door and now I'm back at this place. Like that is such a great feeling in those other games. And the fact that they still have that here is wonderful. And Stormvale, much like Justin mentioned how Lingrave is like the densest and most full of things, Stormvale is definitely that for the legacy dungeons, I think, as well. Like it is so big. There are so many places to go. There are so many things to find. So many NPCs, it's just a ton of stuff happening there. And, it can be definitely like a slog at times because you get into certain areas where you're like, okay, I just got to get through this area so I can find the shortcut back to the site of grace. So I never have to do these birds who throw fucking exploding barrels at me ever again. So how did you feel about that experience, that dungeon, Jake?
Yeah, that like after spending 25 odd hours in Limgrave, that was another kind of completely new learning experience. And again, like the first like few, I don't know how long in total I spent in Stormvale, but the kind of the first, let's say, I don't know, first hour or so of Stormvale it was kind of rough just because it was long stretches where you didn't have sight of grace and you were running out of heals and various things, and there were lots of pretty tough enemies like I said, with the birds with knives on their feet. They were they were a bad time. But again, it would like makes you think as you sort of like get through, then you have to go back and once you die and you're like going back and forth, it kind of makes you just play more like thoughtatively and like not just running in thinking my sword can one hit this thing, but their sword can also one hit me. So it's like just again learning the patterns of the enemies, even though they're they're not bosses, but there's a lot of them, so you have to learn their patterns and like how they're grouped and various things like that. And it was and I ended up like really really enjoying Stormvale despite the sort of like rough start. It was and the I think the bit, is it the what side of grace was it? The let's have a look. Sorry, I've got the
is it the lift side chamber
map up. yeah, I think it was the one that, and then you go out with the birds with the
birds are right there.
Yeah, that was tough because then you go down a little bit and round, and then there's a larger enemy, like a large knight enemy, specifically, and he was a rough time. So it's just lots of tough enemies back to back without any sight of grace or anything to sort of heal you or anything like that. But I think that's what I enjoyed about that area was kind of how punishing it was, which is weird because
you're gonna love Dark Souls.
But yeah. But it was fun. It was just like incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
Without being overly frustrating, it wasn't a case of like I cannot get through this. Like I felt like that with a few of the bosses where I was just like, don't know how physically anyone does this, but that area I was like, this is hard, but I'm kind of chipping away at it, and it feels it was fun and it was satisfying, and I felt like that was what the game was trying to be, was this sort of fun. I don't know.
No, it makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Stormville has, I think, one of the more unique interactions in the game and maybe in the history of the Souls games. What did you do with the NPC character that gives you the hint right as you approach the castle? the guy who is like, well, you could go through the gate, or you could go up around this way. The guards don't know about it.
Yeah.
What did you do with that guy, Jake?
I think I went. What did I do? That's a good question. I think I went out the side gate, like he said, and then I got killed by birds, and then I tried to go the main gate and just got hit with
that's
arrows.
hell. Walking through that there was hell.
So then I think overall I ended up going the side gate, and I think was that he ends up like stealing your runes or something like that, doesn't he? Like when you die,
yes,
he has a few of your runes.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I saw that from like a you didn't know this about Elden Ring.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But I was like, wow, that's interesting. But yeah.
So I didn't realize that until I had actually cleared Stormville Castle, and I was in the next area of the game. I was in Linernia or whatever, the lakes. I'm in the lakes, and I'm dying, and I'm like, wait a second. I swear I had more runes than this. And I had to look it up, and I went back into the castle, and I found that guy who is right where the boss is, and I murdered him. And that was the
does he continue to steal your runes? Like
he's not supposed to. Justin got some sort of glitch.
I got a glitch. I had a few glitches in the game where characters were not where they were supposed to be, and I had things happening to me that weren't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was losing hundreds of runes at a clip every time I died, and I was like, "This is no longer tenable." But like for me, like, I died a couple of times in Stormvale, but I played the game very carefully. If I had runes, I would really do everything I could to not die. When I don't have runes, like after you level up, it is the most freeing feeling in the world. Being
such
like,
a great feeling.
I have 200 runes on me. Oh my God, I could go balls out whenever I want. And I would die then. And at that point, if I was getting runes stolen, I didn't really notice. But yeah, that is a sneaky good interaction. And like you could catch him in the act.
Yeah.
If you know to look for it. Like if you turn around at some points, you could see him following you. Which it's just like something like the game does all these little things that it doesn't ever explain, and we'll get into it later. So many little things that unless you are really looking for it, you're not going to see, and that's what makes the game really, really good. I love the way they do level design. For all my issues with the Soul series, I am a huge fan of the way they design their labyrinths. And the funny thing is, in every other Souls game, I am like, I don't want to explore. I want to live and be done with this game as soon as humanly possible. And yet I explored every inch of Stormville. I went back down and did the optional boss just because I was like, well, like, I want to see it. I want to see everything the game has to offer. And so I explored that castle from head to toe, and which was really funny because later there was a character I should have seen that I never saw, and Bobby was like, I don't understand. How did you miss this person? And I'm like, I don't know. I went into that room and they weren't there. And so it turns out I had a glitch where that character just did not show up. But
yeah.
It is a very good labyrinth.
Yeah, it's great. And Justin mentioned the level design. Like they are just very committed to their architecture, everything having a purpose, and everything that you see being something that you can eventually interact with or experience. So you can walk up to the castle and be like, oh, there's scaffolding up here on the left. I wonder how I'm ever going to go up there, or is that just for show? And then 2 hours later, you walk out of a window and you're like, holy shit, I'm on the scaffolding that I saw 2 hours ago. Like that, they're really great at that stuff. And they like that stuff like, oh, I went up this. Where does this elevator go? Oh, shit, it goes right to the site of grace that I was at before. How, that, like, they're great at that. Stormville, for me, what I think was so interesting about Stormville is usually with their levels, and I think all their other levels are like this, all the other dungeons are like this, except for Stormville, because you don't go in the front door, right? Because you go in the side area. I'm kind of like, where am I supposed to be going? Like, am I supposed to be heading down? Am I supposed to be heading up? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And when you get to that like courtyard, when you walk out that door and there's like, I don't know, 10 archers like waiting outside of that door for you. And then there's like that giant like omen dude with his like dog and everything. I was like, I guess I'm supposed to go through this. Like, I can't imagine like this is here and I'm not supposed to go through this. but then like, to lead you around, and you have to go all the way around and past that troll and then up, and then, Godric's there, but you can also go to the left, and there's more stuff to do to your left, and you're like, it's like, it's so big, and like I think they intentionally put you in a place to confuse you because they want new players especially to realize like there is no wrong way to go. Wherever you go, there will be something there for you to find, whether it be an item, whether it be an area, because there's a whole underground area of Stormville with a boss and like some lore stuff that's like, pretty like that's pretty cool. That sets off some more NPC quest lines and stuff like that. So all that stuff, like, I think it's really cool how they design that level. And then I think the preceding dungeons, they kind of make them a little bit more, I mean, they have branching paths, but a lot more straightforward, because they know that like, okay, now you kind of have the idea that you can go explore if you want to. We're not going to force you to explore if you don't want to. What do we all think of Godric as a boss, Justin?
I thought it was a good fight.
Yeah.
I think I got him on my second time.
It was pretty early.
I was not I was not a fan of his second phase
with the dragon arm,
because with the dragon arm, fire in this game it's nasty, and they use it in a lot of different ways. But like, my character was never very strong against fire, so I was just basically spamming healing. I think I beat him my first time I saw his second phase, but I just happened to be lucky and have like a lot of health left, and so it was basically when he did the fire move, I was getting hit by it no matter what, but I just happened to have enough damage on him where I could negate that, and I could win the straight punching match, is how I won a lot of these fights. It was a really cool design. I want to actually expand on that a bit. The designs of this game, like the bosses, all awesome. The second phases of bosses are they take like an awesome thing and like expand on it by a ton. So like, I'm just gonna have this dragon arm now, no big deal.
Yeah,
really cool, like really, really cool.
I always find that the second phase is if it's like there's a physical change for their second phase, it's always a little bit gross as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like
yes,
like Godric was kind of gross, and who was it? I think is it Godfrey? Like kind of at the close to the end of the game. That was pretty gross. Like they're cool. Like once you get into the fight, it's pretty cool. It's not so gross, but like the cutscene in the middle, it's always like them ripping some dead animal's head open and sticking their arm in it or something. I
think generally, cool, Jake, you just nailed like Soul's design philosophy, which is it's awesome, but it's gross. It's like the general like rule of all of their design. You look at this thing, it looks so cool, but it also looks disgusting. And then, like, it's in constant pain. And like that's what like you like everything is like. When I mentioned like how hard Margit was for me, when I got to Godric, I was like, okay, here we go. This is the next step up. And I think it was like 2 or 3 times that when I ended up beating him. I brought Nephilim in, like the NPC cooperator that you can bring in, for that fight. And she was good. Like she drew a lot of aggro, which is like the most important thing. But when you bring in NPC contributors, just like when you bring in real people, it ups the health of the boss. So if that NPC dies early or something, you're making your life harder for yourself at that point. But I brought Nephilim in, and she was able to take some aggro, and like, I think I was still running Faith at that point, so I was chucking some like fireballs out of my hand at him and stuff like that, and then getting in with my sword and hitting him a little bit. But that fight wasn't terribly hard, but cool. And I remember I was like, I remember when I was like ahead of Justin and Andy, and when they got to that boss, I'm like, this boss is really cool. I was like, you guys have no idea like what's coming on some of the later bosses, because like, From is really, I think, one of the last great boss designing, developers. Like a lot of times in a lot of games when there are bosses, you're like, why is there a boss here? Like it's just, they just put a big health bar on an enemy I fought 100 times already, basically, is what they're doing. And especially in AAA games. Indie games are, I think, a little bit better about it, but especially in AAA games, you're like, this is just like a thing you do because this is what games do. Like, you're not doing this because it makes sense for your design. But From is so dedicated to like this idea of boss fights that they often have some of the best. And I think Godric is great. it kind of gives you a peek into what the spectacle is going to be, right, of later bosses. When you beat Godric, you go kind of walk through his like throne room or whatever to get to the next area. And when you walk through that area, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but like that symbol comes up in the right corner of your screen that's like, this is like a non-attack area. This is like a I don't know if either of you finished off the quest that kind of like finalizes what that room is supposed to be. I don't know if you guys ever did that quest. So
No, I don't think I did.
So Nephili, who you summon in there, if you do her quest and you give her these Stormhawk ashes that you find when you go through those belfries, those portals that can take you to weird places. One of them takes you back to the first boss fight of the game, where you fight the grafted Scion again. In the room there is a thing. There are two ashes. One is like, oh, here's like a spirit ash you can use, and here's one that doesn't answer to anybody or something. It's like a key item. You give that to her, and eventually, after you beat a certain boss, I can't remember which one it is. I think it's after you beat Radon or something. She kind of takes her rightful place as like the ruler of the area. So she comes and becomes like the king of Stormvale, basically. And Gostic, if you haven't killed him, is like her gatekeeper. I forgot who the guy from Fort Hate. The guy who it's like, excuse me, my castle's been taken over. Can you help me? I'll make you a lord. And he's like, I can't make you a lord. Whatever. He goes there and he's like her, like he like works for her or whatever. He's like, her advisor or whatever. And that kind of finishes off her storyline, because she's actually the daughter, or she's the descendant of Godfrey, basically, because his real name is Horalu and she's Nephililu. So she's like a rightful heir or whatever to that world. So, but that area becomes like a little hub area where there's a couple of, like, one of the guys becomes a merchant and you could buy things, and it's like you get an item for doing it too. But
cool.
After that, you walk out into, you've done this whole, I've done all of Limgrave. It's so big and whatever. And you walk out of that boss fight and you walk out into Lernia, and I don't know about you guys, but when I walked out into that area, I was just like, holy shit, this thing is huge. You're looking out into like the far distance. And I was thinking at the time, I was like, oh, that must be like, I'm looking at the whole game here. I'm looking at, here's a castle like for one boss, and then nope, it's just that one area. It just happens to have two like big like things that you can do.
And I think it's when you come out and you see, that's basically half of Leonia as well.
Yeah.
Like that you can actually see, because it goes to I don't know if you can even see Raya Lucaria at that point. You can see up to there's the big kind of cliff area, and it just looks so vast.
Yeah.
And then there's like twice as much in that one area.
Yeah.
It's just that was mind-boggling.
I think Lernia ended up being my favorite area of the game. I think I just like the way it's designed. I like the look of it. I'm always a fan of in their games of like the Gothic like architecture and like sort of like the magic stuff, like the lore of the magic, the way it looks, the way it behaves. And so I really liked that area a lot. Plus, there's a lot of cool like NPC quests that you can pick up there and stuff like that. Like it's how you can get the quest to get to Volcano Manor much easier than the actual just like, let's just brute force my way into Volcano Manor. There's that lady who you can give the eyes to so she can eat them. There's like the there's Caria Manor. You meet the blacksmith who can, I mean, if you look to your left when you get to that site of grace, you can see the 9-foot tall or whatever 20-foot tall giant blacksmith with the mirror helm on, and he can give you somber smithing stones. I say this because Justin missed him.
Who would miss that?
Justin totally missed him. He's like, where is he sitting? I was like, Justin, go to the site of grace. You can't miss him.
So I missed a lot in this game when it comes to NPC quests.
I think
so. Bobby mentioned bringing in a fight at Morgoth or whatever, like an NPC. I have no idea who you're talking about. No idea who that was whatsoever. For somebody who explored as much as I did, and I did because my level at the end of the game was extremely high for somebody who never grinded. I somehow missed all of these quests, and that like it bums me out in a way because They sound awesome. Like there was an entire area around Volcano Manor that I missed until I beat the game. And then the next day when I was cleaning up trophies, there was like, I'm missing an achievement. Where is this boss? Like, where is this one boss? And I was just like, I looked it up and I was like, I have no clue where this area is. How did I miss this? So yeah, like I ended up missing a lot of NPCs, especially the very big tall man reading a book, literally right next to a site of grace.
Because he's like, oh, I need a somber smithing stone 3, and I was like, just go buy it from EG. He was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, the dude who sells you somber smithing stones. But yeah, so I really like that area a lot. Like I kind of like the idea that like there's these two like kind of peninsulas on either side, and then the middle there, that's where the academy is. I did Caria Manor first, and man, that was one of those times you talked about, Jake, you getting stuck in a certain place. There's a part in Caria Manor. First of all, it has those hand spiders on the ground, which I hate.
Oh my god!
Oh god! No, even to the end of the game when I was super powerful, I was like, I don't want anything to do with these things. Nothing to do with these things. They freak me out. I don't like them. But once I got through there, you kind of get to this area where you have to kind of walk across. You're kind of at the top of the manor, and you have to kind of walk across these like bridges, almost like buttresses or whatever. And these like ghost people pop up like while you're walking, and they come up behind you and in front of you. And I had such a difficult time like getting through that point. Like I didn't have any really good range at that point. I was still just running like a faith thing or whatever, and I was just like I can't do this right now. Like I'm just having too much trouble like getting through this, and that took me a long time to get through that. And that was one of the times where I was like, man, and that was the time where I treated it like a Dark Souls game. Basically, I was just like, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to keep beating my head against it until I get through it, because like, I don't want to leave and come back, because I'm not going to want to come back. Because I know it's optional, I know this isn't like the thing. So that area was tough for me. And that the boss of that area, the Loretta, the knight of the Carrion like manor or whatever, Carrion royal family, I had a lot of trouble with that boss. Like it just beat me up a lot. But it is where I found the Sword of Night and Flame, so I can't be angry all the way about that area. But like design wise, very cool. But I had a lot of trouble with that place for sure.
I went to the study hall first.
Oh yeah.
And I cleared that place out, and then was like, where do I go? Like, I don't understand. And you're like, oh, you have to come back here later. And I was like, it was very hard getting through that area.
Yeah. That was a very hard area. That Preceptor Miriam or whatever is a pain in the ass, like NPC invader or whatever to get through. Before I even got to Rhea Lucardia's manor, I went into like, I was in explore mode, and I went through that crevice all the way to the top and started climbing up all those ladders and straight up that cliff face until I hit the magma worm. Yeah. And
I did the magma worm and then got into the Atlas Plateau before I had ever even seen the evil Harry Potter school. So
yeah, but that's cool too. Like that's some of the great thing about these games, right? You mentioned just like, how do you turn level design from the Souls games into geography? And that's one of the ways they do it, right? Which is that like, yeah, you can go get those 2 halves of that medallion and you can take the lift up like you're supposed to, or you can go through this cave system and climb up, and then you're out into this later area, just by kind of exploring and ingenuity, which I thought was cool. And then there's also, of course, there's Rhea Lucaria, which is the evil Harry Potter school, which is Justin is mentioning. How did you like that dungeon, Jake?
I really enjoyed Rhea Lucaria. I found it a lot less stressful than Stormville. It felt a lot more straightforward, but I did have to switch up the way that I was playing quite a lot, because up until that point I was very heavily just using magic. But obviously it's a magic school, so they've learned to deal with people that are using magic. But just before, I think I was in what's the village called? It's the village of the Albinaurics.
That's such a cool place.
Yeah, it was really cool. That's where I found the crystal sword, and so I switched to that because that scales with intelligence, so that's great. And then I had a much easier time. Like I was taking down those horrible zombie skeleton creatures that suck away all of your FP.
Oh yeah.
I was dealing with them fairly easily, which was quite good. But they came in hordes, so that was like, oh, I'm dealing with like 10 of these guys at the same time. So that was quite interesting. But largely it was a relatively stress-free experience until fighting what's his name? Red Wolf Radagon? Is that
Red Wolf of Radagon? I think it is the Red Wolf of Radagon. Yeah,
and that was tough because that was a kind of the first time that I was facing a boss where I wasn't intentionally doing it from range, just because there is no range in that tiny little room that you're fighting him, and he closes in on you really quickly. But that was like, that was a fun boss fight, but it was quite tough. And then I don't know if you wanted to get on to talking about the Renala fight.
Absolutely,
I think that was one where at first I found it really, really stressful, just simply because there wasn't a site of grace anywhere near her, and there weren't any States of America. So that was like, you have to run a really long way to get to this, and you have to go past up the stairs where the ball comes down, and like learning the pattern for that was fine, but it was just like, if you like messed it up a little bit and you die, you have to run all the way back. It's just a bit annoying, but I kind of learned to sort of get along with it, because the first phase of her fight, I sort of just worked out the pattern of what you needed to do, of just killing that one with the kind of gold shimmer around their head, and then moving on to the actual main section of the fight. And that was good, because that fight again, like sort of going on from Red Wolf of Radagon, it was a fight where I was just a lot more aggressive than I have been previously. Because I was just two-handing a sword, and you can get fairly close to her, and that's kind of the way to do it. Like, hopefully, like, use a spirit summon to hopefully aggro her spirit summons away, and then just go and attack her. It was just a different way of thinking about the bosses, whereas before it was either kind of be at range or be a bit more sort of, I don't know, be slower and wait for an opening. Whereas with her, I was just like, just run at her and attack her, and that worked. So.
Yeah, because if you can stun her out of her animations, she won't be able to do any of those like big attacks that she sort of like primes at you.
Yeah.
I thought Ray Lucaria was very cool. I had a tougher time with that fucking guy guarding her elevator than I had with the boss itself, that like knight that guards elevator. And the way I ended up getting him was completely by accident, because I was like, I just want to unlock this elevator. So I ran to the elevator and got it to start moving up, and he actually killed me when I was sitting on the elevator, but he like backed up off the elevator and just fell to his death. And I got I got his shield, or whatever the item you get for beating him, and I was like, okay, I was like, is he gonna be back when I get? And he was not there anymore. I was like, very nice. The cool thing about Ray Lucaria is that, like I said, like the path that you have to walk down is much more clear in this than it is in Stormvale, but there is so much to explore if you decide to go off, because like you can basically walk across the entire rooftop system of the academy. There's a ton of secret rooms. There's talismans hidden all over the place there. There's enemies in places that are weird. You can actually teleport to that the church with the turtle pope in it if you want to. I did that, and I was like, oh fuck. I can't get back. I was like, I gotta transport back and go back from that side of Grays now.
There's also, the academy holds a shortcut to Volcano Manor as well, which is not a shortcut that you know about. It's you like, oh crap, I'm dead. Oh no, there's lava everywhere. I'm actually in hell.
Yeah,
because that's what happened to me. Is I got eaten. I took that gear system all the way down to the bottom, and there's one of those horrendous machines that grab you and eat you.
Yeah,
and then I woke up in Volcano Manor, and I was like, well,
I never
as well. You never got that. You never had that happen.
No, I
Oh,
never,
yeah,
I
that's
never
what-
went down. I never went down on the sort of like gear lift system.
Yeah.
So I went all the way to the bottom.
Kind of, yeah. Kind of a similar thing with Stormville. You're talking about the whole underground area. I didn't even touch that. I didn't know that existed. So, there's so many things that I just like completely missed. Just I thought I was exploring these areas like thoroughly, and I knew full well that there was so much more to explore. But I was just like, I felt like I've explored tons.
It's not like it's not like it's a big area down there, but there's one of those like tall machines that like will grab you and put you into their furnace.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, I died. And I died, but I woke up in Volcano Manor. And then from there, I was just like, well, I'm here now. And so I went through and started like, that's what I loved about this game was like, it to me, it reminded me so much of how I play Bethesda games where it's like, like I'm just exploring. And so that's how I ended up doing a lot of the game is just like I hit every area. If I came across an area, I was clearing that area out and then going back and doing whatever I was doing. So I was in Volcano Manor and it was just like, all right, well, obviously I'm here early where I thought I was. And I came across like the boss of that area, which is another nightmare. But I was a high enough level that I beat it. And then I came out and I forget where it puts you. Does that also put you on a different end of the Atlas Plateau?
It puts you into it puts you onto Mount Gelmir, but like on like that river in Mount Gelmir basically is where it puts you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then I went back and ended up from there being like, okay, I should go back and finish the magic school. And so there I went back and fought Renala.
Yeah.
We didn't even touch on this when we were talking about Limgrave, but I think the coolest part, I think, for me of the entire game is when you're in Limgrave and you're running away from a giant fucking bear and you come across a building and you're like, where does this elevator go?
Oh, yeah.
And it takes you down to Noxtella.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, there is an entire other area underneath this giant area. And then, I mean, it gets only bigger from there.
Yeah. It's not when you find the map piece because you're like, oh, this must just be like a little side area, like a catacomb, basically. And then you find a map piece and you're like, what? This area is huge.
Elden Ring is amazing because it has an entire other game underneath the first game.
Yeah.
Stretching from, Noxtella to all these other areas, the sewer system underneath the Royal Capital and Deep Root Depths and all that stuff where it's like, oh my God, there's an entire other game under here.
Yeah.
But that moment for me of being like, wow, this game is big, was just something that we skipped when we were talking about
Yeah, I had the underground sub as another like kind of full section that we were.
Okay,
we were
so
we'll
get there.
Yeah, but for sure, I wouldn't forget about those sections. I think I was a little bit under leveled when I was doing Carrion Manor and like this area and the Magic School and Ray Lucaria, but I kind of pushed. I was like. Basically, it was that point where I was like, I need to just push through this and get through this because this is the kind of stuff that will usually stop me when I'm playing these games. It's like, but I'm gonna put my head down. I'm just gonna get through them. And I did. That transition. One of the things I love about that, like that transition when, you get her. I beat the first health bar. I was like, there's no way this is. I was like, there's no way this is the boss fight. I was like, there's gonna be another health bar for Renala. Like, there's no way. Like, this is just too easy. It's just too easy. And that transition when like Ronnie is like, you're gonna leave my mother alone or whatever, and she kind of like conjures like the former glory of Renala, and like you're in that like lake with like the giant moon, and she's like looking all like badass at you. It was so cool, and I think like that fight is interesting because like it's really just about either stunning her out of or avoiding these sort of like megaton magic attacks that she does. Right, if you get caught in like the Comet Azure, basically like Kami Ha that she does, like you're gonna die. If you get caught, in like all the little like stars that come out of her that she sends out hit you at one time, you're probably gonna die. You just have to avoid those things, and if you can just kind of beat her up a little bit, you can do it. And I had a weapon that you could stagger pretty decently, so I was able to like stagger her out of most of the things. But the first time she like summoned her own spirit ashes, and it was like a fucking dragon. I was terrified that it was just going to stick around till I killed it. That was the thing that was my main sticking point the first couple of times I lost, was I was like, do I have to beat these things that she's like summoning? I know they go away like after a couple of moments after they try to attack you, but it was definitely like that was a big part of that fight. I just love the design of the fight, and it also unlocks the ability to respec, right? So that was cool. And this game, I would say the respecking thing is a major component, because it in the past with their games, if you made a choice to really hard level into a group of categories, and then you found a weapon late in the game that you were like, oh man, this would be so cool to use, it would just be like, well, I guess that's going to be New Game Plus or whatever, because there's no way I'm going to be able to level into that unless I just grind for hours and hours and hours. And this game, it takes a resource, but that resource is not that difficult to find. I think I found like 10 of them or something in my first playthrough, maybe 8 of them or whatever it was. It takes a resource, but you can just go to this person, fast travel to this person, and just go, hey, I want to change my ability scores. And then, because I found a cool weapon that I would rather use right now. And that was great, because it really made, just like the rest of the game, I think, it a little bit more pliable to what you wanted to play. But yeah, I really liked that whole area. There's that one area with like, I think it's in Lernia, right? Where you get to like they find that tower that has like basically the Eye of Sauron on top of it, which is like the madness, like those guys like cracking the madness on you. Like that stuff is just cool. You're just driving. Oh, I'm just riding my horse around. You're like, why the fuck is the status effect starting to build up on me right now? And I love that stuff, like about their games where you don't know what's around different corners, and when you think you know what's coming up, they pull something on you that is way different. Just like
that's where the 4 belfries are as well.
Yeah,
is in that area.
Yeah, the 4 belfries are cool. I don't know, Jake. Did you find the 4 belfries? Did you explore them at all?
That doesn't ring a bell.
There are these 4 teleporters, 3 teleporters, sorry, in this area in Lernia where you have to do these special keys, and it'll take you to certain places. So one of them takes you back. So one of them takes you back to the first boss fight against that you die at the very beginning of the game. The grafted scion, and you can kill that. You get to kill that, your revenge tour on that thing, and kill it.
There is like secret stuff there.
Yeah,
like,
there's secret stuff there.
That building that you wake up in, there's things above you there that you can only get when you come back to that area.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they take you to a couple of different places.
Yeah. So one of them is, and this is what's really cool about it. One of them is like another side of a bridge that you look at when you're in like the underground area. You're like, how the heck do I get across that bridge? Because there's stuff over there. It takes you over there, and there's like a Crucible Knight you can kill over there. But one of them takes you to Farum Azula, like super early in the game, and I found it. I went to it, and I was like, I went to the teleporter, and I woke up, and it was like crumbling Farum Azula, and you're on a floating piece, like out away from the main level. You can't interact with the main level, but you can see the storm and the area, and I was just like, where the fuck is this? Like what? Where is this part of the game? Like this game is so much bigger than I ever even imagined. Like what is this area? It's neat, just like, early in the game, you get transported up into like Caelid or up into the capital, and you're just like so far, off the map that you have, and you're like, what am I doing here?
That teleporter that's from the peninsula that takes you up to the royal capital, where you have to fight the giant guy, and you obviously not meant to survive at first, but you see that huge dragon, that massive dragon, where you're like, what is this place?
Yeah,
and it's also the fact that it's like you look down and you see this like huge city.
Yeah,
and it's like you can't see it from anywhere where you are at that point in time. Like down in Limgrave, you can't see any remnants of like this massive city, and then it just shows how vast the game is. That it's like I assumed that this was going to be when you get teleported to the capital. I assumed that was going to be like a separate map kind of thing where. You get teleported there at some point, like for the story, and it's like a whole separate section of the game. It's like, no, it is fully attached, but it's just, the map is just so huge that you just, it's impressive.
It's very impressive. Very, very impressive. So Lernia, I think, anything else they wanted to say about Lernia before we move off and we go to the nightmare area?
No, I mean, it's I thought that was a really cool area of the game. There's a lot there. I think it's probably the area. Well, maybe not as dense. There is more there, I think, to see than even Limgrave. Like,
Yeah.
I'm talking about with like hitting catacombs and stuff
Mhm.
like that. Like, there is just a lot of stuff around those lakes that you run into, and you're like, huh, okay, like I'll have to come back to this later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I experienced my first Deathbird fight as well, when I was like just happened to be riding past a place I'd never ridden past at night, and all of a sudden it was like Deathbird, and I was like, what? I've been here 100
mine
times.
was in the peninsula.
Yeah. So let's talk about Caelid. I found Caelid. I was exploring Limgrave, right? I was exploring Limgrave, and I was just like, oh, what's across this bridge? Let me just walk over this area, and all of a sudden the sky turned red. And I found a church, and I think I got invaded by an NPC invader like when I got to that church, like and I killed that invader, and I was like walking around, and I saw those like giant velociraptor dogs and like the giant birds like sitting on top of like a skeleton, and I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here right now. This seems like this is way too hard for me at the moment. I think I should probably go somewhere else. And no matter what level I was at or how long I was into the game, that's how I felt every single moment I was in Caelid. I was like, please, can I just get out of here as fast as humanly possible? They always have areas like this in their games where you're like, I just hate being here. And this is that one for me. I was like, I just don't want to be here. But it's got a lot of like interesting stuff and cool stuff, and it's got like 1 billion dragons. The amount of dragons that are in Caelid is insane. Jake, what was your experience in Caelid?
It sounds like it was largely the same. Where it just I think the whole game I loved exploring. Kind of, you just like finding little nooks and crannies. Caelid, I did not love exploring because you are constantly being attacked by something.
Yeah,
there was constantly something aggroing to you. But my first experience, I'm sure, is probably the same as most people's first experience, where you get teleported to that one cave.
Oh, the Crystal Cave or whatever. Yeah,
yeah.
I did.
So I got teleported
that.
there, and I.
Oh, really?
Out. Oh, did you not?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I walked out and just got one shot by one of those horrible little prawn things, and I was like, okay, I'm not going back there. But then I looked up on the wiki to find the meteorite stuff, and it was like, it's in Caelid. You have to go through this teleporter to get here. And I was like,
I gotta go back.
But luckily, getting the meteorite stuff, and I think it's rock sling spell.
Yeah.
They're pretty close to each other, and actually getting them wasn't too bad as long as you ride torrent and kind of just avoid everything. It was actually okay getting them. But yeah, from that very point, just riding through the lake, or what's the lake actually called? It's not the Lake of Rot. That's a whole separate section. But,
Aeonia,
the lake
swamp, the Swamp of Rot.
Yeah. Swamp of Aeonia. Yeah. Riding through that, you just kind of was the rest of my experience, entirety of Caelid. It's like just riding through, being like, nope.
Yep.
every single hour.
I thanked everything for having torrent in that area. That was I was like, oh, I'm so glad torrent exists because I can just speed past all this shit. The thing about Caelid is it's a terrible place to be, but it includes a couple of my favorite things in the game, which is I think like it has one of my favorite side quests in the game, which is the Millicent side quest, which is the woman you talk to Gowry, who's that guy in the shack who's like there's a woman, like a girl who's overcome by the Scarlet Rot up in this church, and she has a quest that takes you basically through the entire game, like all the way through an optional area of the game. Her quest, it's a long quest, but you get a really good reward for it when you finish it, and it's just cool. It's got a lot of cool aspects to it, and it has a lot of like, you can bring her in to help you do things, and you find her in certain places, and you find items throughout the game that you give to her that kind of like progress the quest. It's just a really good quest. I like that a lot. You do have to fight that guy, Commander O'Neill, in the middle of the swamp to progress it, and that fight itself is not that bad, except there are these things called the Clean Rot Knights, which like spawn in the swamp. They kind of have like those Valkyrie looking like helmets and stuff on, and they kind of patrol the swamp. And when I was fighting this boss, I was trying to like avoid some of his attacks, and I hit a point where I actually aggroed the Clean Rot Knights, and they came over to the boss fight to also try to attack me during the boss fight. So like that was a nightmare. That was an absolute nightmare. And of course, Scarlet Rot is like the worst status effect in the game. It's the most damaging. It's the one that keeps building up even when you've like removed yourself from whatever's causing it. So it is all the games have something like this in them, and this is that one, and it just has to be a whole area that's kind of based around it in a lot of ways. But so that area is nightmare. But I also liked like the Town of Sorcery, like Cilia Town of Sorcery. That was neat. It had a little puzzle thing to it. But tell me about the boss there. It was trivial because I was so high level that it was like 4 hits and one of the bosses was dead. So, and I brought my mimic in with me, and it was basically I could let the mimic solo it. Basically, I could have just like stood back, and let the mimic fight them.
I think my experience with that boss was I saw the kind of golden haze, and I kind of forgot about it.
Yeah.
Like, and it was like a few hours later, and I was like trying to find a way to sort of like gather more runes. I was like, oh, there's that boss.
Yeah.
And then I went back and I think I basically just 2-hit them. Like,
yeah.
That was anticlimactic. But.
Yeah. Justin, how did you feel about Caelid?
Well, the first time I went there, there was one thing that stuck in my craw for a while. It was actually when I was in Limgrave. I was on a beach, and there were these items up on a cliff face, and I could not figure out how to get these items. And eventually it dawned on me, like, I must have to take a tunnel that comes out that I just can't see. And I figured that the tunnel was in Caelid. So I got into Caelid by just, jumping over that little rock wall, calling Torrent, and then hugging the I guess, southernmost part of it, and just going down till I found a castle. And in that castle, this is where I thought it is like the first time you see one of those like lion things.
Oh, with the
like
swords?
Patrolling around with the sword in it. So I jumped in there and was just like, I picked up a couple of items and to set like, obviously, clearly, I'm just not ready for this yet. When I returned there, I actually got taken, up a lift? And that was my first time getting back into Caelid, where you come across where the giant pot is.
Oh,
that was the second time I went into Caelid, and I was like, well, this isn't fun either. But I thought the actual area itself is probably the most, or one of the cooler looking areas in any of the Souls games I've played. It makes you feel bad, but like you look and you see these giant skulls that are like caved into like the mountainsides, and like it's a cool looking area. And when you are stronger and able to like go up to those velociraptor dogs and those birds and fuck them up, like I think that was the first time I ever felt like, oh wow, killing enemies here is worth it, because they would drop like at the time like 2,000 runes. And that was like at that point, I only needed maybe like 20,000 to level, or 22,000 to level. And so I was like, I'm killing everything in sight here because I'll get an easy level out of it. And that area is cool. Like there is a lot there. What was the one thing that we did there? Some of those,
we did that cave too. That's where the scarab, the golden scarab cave is.
Yeah, that's where the scarab is, and that fight is annoying. That cave is annoying.
Yeah, it's just cave of Scarlet Rot, basically. That's all it is. It's a cave full of Scarlet Rot. Yeah.
There's a lot of like just like neat areas there. I forget the tower there. Is that the tower where you're continually going down, like you're platforming down, or is that was the Ray Lucario one?
That was the Ray Lucario one. No, the Caelid Tower one, you do have to go down, because you have to come to it from a cliff and like
climb
jump
up the outside.
Yeah, climb up the outside of it, and then you have to go inside. And
then go down. So I thought that sucked. Let me tell you, as much as I enjoyed these games and I love the fact that they added a jump button, platforming in these games, platforming in this game never felt good ever. And there is an entire tower for you to like, let me walk to the edge, and then drop and land on this tiny little platform, and then jump onto another platform. That all felt unbelievably bad. Yeah.
They've always loved their like weird platforming sections. And they never have a jump button in their games. You have to do like a certain, like you have to run and double tap a button. Jump's always been a pain in the ass in their games. And this game, like, well, we got a jump button, so we're going to do all the platforming we possibly can.
That was where the game first broke its own rules for me, because you land on a platform and that platform falls like 20 stories, like, and you're like, oh, obviously wasn't supposed to land on this. I'm dead now. And then you land and you're like, I'm totally fine. The game is ignoring its own rule base. Okay.
It didn't want to be that mean.
That was the first. Yeah, and at the bottom of that tower is where you have to fight the first Godskin, like one of the Godskin guys for the first time. That guy sucks.
Yeah.
So Caelid as an area looks really cool. Sucks.
Yeah, it's a rough area. Like Jake said, I liked exploring all the other areas. I did not like exploring in Caelid. It does have that giant dragon that you can kill and get a shit ton of runes early in the game if you just like go to it and like hack at its tail for a while. Because it kills
all the other dragons around it though, and it at the same time.
Yeah,
you got like early in, like, you know, I got like 150,000 runes when it cost me like 32,000 to level, and I was like, I just leveled up 5 times. That's awesome.
What all the guides that are like, hey, here's how to get powerful early in Elden Ring. It basically tells you to get there like super early, like when you're super low level, where it costs like 2,000 runes to level up. So it's basically just kill it. Yeah. It's crazy when you do like that. You know,
that was the Caelid has the one area that I came across. The first boss I came across, I was just like, no, I can't do this. And it's the gargoyle outside the beastie area or whatever.
Yeah. The Blackblade Kindred outside of the Beast's clergyman.
Yes.
I don't think I even attempted that.
The gargoyles in this game were a nightmare for me because my attacks were not suited for it. So that fight was bad. And so like I had tried it for a couple of times. I was just like, this is like, I had to say like, Justin, this is exactly what we were talking about. Go in another direction.
Yeah.
And then later I got teleported and ended up behind him. And I was like, all right, now I'll try it. And the fight went much better 15 hours later.
Yeah. I don't even think like the game really even expects you to fight him at a certain point. I think it's like, it's a temptation for you or whatever. But sorry, go ahead.
Also, I was gonna say, because that gargoyle doesn't aggro to you, does it? Unless you intentionally attack it.
I think if you pass directly in front of him, he'll aggro to you. But if you come up and go around him and go back into the beach, once you're behind him, he doesn't even realize you're there anymore. He doesn't care about you. But Caelid does have what very well might be like the most spectacular looking boss fight they've ever done, which is the Radon Star Scourge boss fight. First of all, like, I don't know what sets up the castle to be this way, because the first time I played through it, I didn't go to Redmane Castle until it was already this way, but I teleported into like the area in front of the castle from that tower that you can go up to in Caelid. There's like a teleporter that can take you across that bridge. And there was nobody there. There was because I went there another time with my other second character, and when I got there, they were shooting arrows at me, and there was people everywhere. There was nobody there, and I was like, "What's going on?" And I just like walked in, and I was like, there was 2 of those lion guys like patrolling on the bottom floor, but there was no enemies, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And I'm walking around, and I'm like, "What the?" I'm expecting it to be like the next dungeon that I have to do to get to the boss, right? Nobody's attacking me. There's like this like Halo ass sounding music playing, like these monks chanting, you know, they're like, oh, and I walk into that courtyard and I'm like, hey, what are all my buddies doing here? The big jar man's there, the wolf dude is there, you know, and you know, you have to initiate that Radon boss fight. You have to go down into that like what has to be the biggest arena they've ever created for a boss fight. I mean, it is the size of an area of a game. Like basically, like, you know, if you've been like, okay, this is like the area, like, is it as if a dungeon could have been placed in that area and filled the entire area, right? Like, this giant battlefield where you have to fight this ginormous man riding a tiny little horse. And as soon as you load in, you teleport in, he just starts fucking shooting crazy magic at you and then crazy arrows at you. But that moment when I realized I could summon every NPC I'd probably encountered in the game to that point to come in and fight, was just like a jaw-dropping moment for me. Like where the game was like, no, you can have like 9 people in here fighting with you in this moment. And I didn't even realize that I could ride my horse during the boss fight when I did it. I beat it without ever riding my horse. And I don't.
That's just crazy talk.
And I don't know how. I don't know how I did it. But I did it, and I was using a faith build at the point, so I had a rot breath on the dragon rot breath, and he's very weak to rot. So I basically just ran up to him, breathed rot all over him, and then just ran away. And his health bar was just like tick 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 tick. But you know, Jake, how did you feel about when you got into that boss fight? Did you have any idea what to expect when you walked in there?
No, that was the first time I felt like the kind of like massive spectacle, like it compared like a little bit to the Renala fight. In that it gets into this amazing arena and it's like this massive kind of skyscape or whatever. But yeah, and then kind of walking in, I was like tentatively walking in and then instantly getting hit with a massive arrow. I was like, oh, okay, but I won't be so tentative. I'll maybe I'll go a little bit quicker. But yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, and like just running around and summoning everyone and then just running in with everyone. It just felt, it was really, really cool. It just felt like a lot of these games, like a lot of this game, you feel very much on your own fighting this like behemoth beasts, but you know, it felt like you were part of like a kind of like an army kind of thing. Which is a really cool experience. But the boss fight was still hard, like doing all the summoning and your own spirit summons and riding torrent. It was still a tough boss. But I think wasn't there a point, I think it got nerfed or
it got nerfed and then it got rebuffed, so it's been both in the time.
Because I think I fought it for the first time after it was rebuffed. So and it was pretty tough, and but yeah, again, it was like another impressive way of switching the way that you play the game, because I at that point was back to sort of trying to be a little bit more close quarters, but like the way that he was like spinning around and everything, and him being such a big boss, it felt better to be maybe a little bit more range. But yeah, it took me a good few tries to beat Radahn, but it was a lot of fun. And kind of the bit halfway through the boss fight where you think, oh, maybe I'm done, and then he comes down as a massive meteor and kind of pancakes you. That was like, no.
Well, it was what was great about doing how Justin and I played it, which was in the party, everyone in the party together. I already fought him. I fought him alone. Like, you know, I wasn't in party. I fought him like one day, and I got to hear both Justin and Andy's reaction to the meteor thing, which was both of them going like, wait, where did he go? And me just kind of like on the other side of the party being like, like this like look of like this like mischief on my face. And then everyone in his brain was like, what the fuck? And everyone usually dies the first time because they don't know where he's coming from or what he's doing. But like nobody is ever like angry about it. Everyone is just like cackles with like laughter, like joyous laughter, because it's just so insane. Like the scale of that, like him going in there as a meteor and coming crashing down on top of you, it's just something else. Justin, you like that boss fight a lot too, right?
It's a great boss fight. Like it's hard to add more to what you guys are saying, but there are a couple boss fights in this game that were tough but enjoyable. Like I never got tired of it, and this was one of them where you know the spectacle is something, and you're like, you know, you're gonna do it. It's just when, like when are you gonna be able to do it? And the interesting about that boss fight is when it's done. And then you're like, okay, in every other boss area, it's like, all right, let me travel back. And I'm like, this area is just too big for there to be nothing here. I know there's something there. There's like probably one of the harder dungeons in the game. Like, or like little catacombs, like hidden there on the cliffside, that place was nightmarish going in there immediately afterwards. You're like, I could survive here for a little while, but man, this place is tough.
Did you go and did you find that catacomb, Jake? The one that's in the boss arena?
I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't.
So it's called the Undead. It's called the War Dead Catacomb, I think it is, and it has like the spirits of all the people who have died, like on the battlefield, that Radahn battlefield, and it's like crazy powerful spirits in there, like insanely powerful. To the point where like they are all fighting and they're fighting each other. So like you can like go to the boss, you can go walk you can start progressing to the dungeon or whatever, the catacombs, and as they kill each other, you get the runes for it. So and you get a tremendous amount of runes. Like one of them dies, like you get like 5,000 runes for for one of them dying or whatever. It's a crazy place.
That one, it's a crazy place that is also like one of the harder places to survive, to open up the boss door.
Yeah,
it leads you on like a merry chase through the thing, and you are constantly being hunted by these knights that are more powerful than you. Yeah. And then in that the boss fight is one of those really annoying it was
the blighted tree spirit things, like those dragon worms, basically.
Oh, yeah. Are they ulcerated
tree spirits? Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
and he is just pumping out scarlet rot on top of you, and so that was one of the other ones where it was just like, I can't do this right now, I'll have to come back to this guy. But finding that, like, it was just one of those things where it was just like, you're thinking to yourself, this area is just too big for there to be nothing here.
Yeah.
And the game rewards you for having that feeling, being like, no, there is something here. You were right.
Yeah.
And there, like, as far as I know, in none of the other boss arenas, is there anything else like that there. But you're looking and you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Why all this wasted space?
Yeah. Well, the gargoyles fight, there's something. The gargoyles fight.
In the gargoyle fight?
Because there's the coffin that you can get into that takes you down.
Yes.
Into the deep root depths.
I cannot wait to talk about the gargoyle.
Well, we're going to talk about that now, because this is a good place to talk about it, because when you beat Radahn, this is not a lore podcast. That's a whole other thing that we're doing. But Radahn's been holding back the stars, and when he dies, the stars start crashing down, and one big meteor comes and basically blows a hole in the bottom of Lingrave. And you can go down into a part of the underground that you couldn't reach before. So the underground is like a couple different things. It's the two eternal cities, Nokron and Nokstella. There's the Mogwin Palace area. There's the Deep Root Depths. And then there's like the river stuff, like where like the wild, the forests are, where those like dudes, those like Minotaur looking dudes with the big bows will shoot you, and you have to light all like the bracers, and you can go fight those like deer spirit bosses or whatever, those areas as well. This is some of my favorite stuff in the game. Like all the underground stuff I thought was like really, really cool and really great.
Agreed.
Some cool optional bosses that you can fight in there too. I think one of my favorites is down there, which is Astel, the natural born of the void, which you have to fight in the completion of Ranni's quest line. It's also yeah, it's a lot. It's also where you get to the Lake of Rot, which is just, woof. What? The game is just like, yeah, go fuck yourself. You gotta walk through this whole thing, and there's no escape. There's nothing you can do. Like you have to walk through it. There's no other way. Yeah, you can put these things up, but come on.
in the Lake of Rot, when you get to the place that you're supposed to go to, that you get into the second coffin.
Yeah.
When you come into that catacomb area or whatever you want to call it, where you drop down, you have to go to the right first. If you go to the left and then you had it hard left, there is a waterfall of rot that is like pouring into the thing. Did you ever go that way?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So one of those ulcerated things comes crashing out of the waterfall, and I was like, nah, he brought a really great reward, but I ain't doing this, because that area, the enemies there suck.
Yeah, it's all those like pest enemies, those fucking like.
Yeah. And at the time they were taking me forever to kill, and so that thing came crashing out, and I was like, nah, he's probably got like a really great reward, but I'm noping out of here, and just like ran to the coffin and got in.
Well, that was funny because that was right before the Justin's like, there's never anything behind any of these waterfalls. I was like, oh, there's some stuff behind some of the waterfall. Yeah, that whole area, that's a nightmare part. But it like the lead up to like Ranni's whole quest line is very cool. Again, it's one of those things where like I don't understand the first person who ever figured out like how to do all of it, like you were saying, Jake. Like, yeah, like it's so in depth and it's so long. You have to go so many crazy places. Like it's just nutso. And in a certain orders, you have to do things. Like it's just like, it's crazy. But I think that leads you to some of the cooler stuff like in the game if you follow that quest line, because you see the Darkmoon Greatsword at the end of it. You fight Astel, but a bunch of you get taken all through the Eternal Cities and all that stuff, which is really, really neat. But when you're in when you're in the second sort of I guess forest area where there are those the actual like real Minotaur dudes. They're not ghosts anymore. They're like the real versions of them. And there's those ladies who are singing. And I felt eternally bad about killing them because they were like singing and like all the animals were like dancing with them and like loving on them. And I'm like, well, I need these fucking runes. So can you just like, I'm just going to kill you. Or I know you're going to attack me if I walk by you. You're not going to stay. You're not going to stay. Like, I know I'm the one who's not supposed to be here, but like, I need to survive. You kind of, if you walk around a certain way, you get to another area that has a Crucible Knight and you keep pushing through. You find an NPC that you can give armor to. There's a whole thing. But eventually you get to this big open area with a waterfall that has 2 gargoyles in it that you fight.
Let's rewind for a second.
Yeah.
You go into this giant open area. I did not have the I had the NPC. I had to go back and redo that quest. So do that quest so that he could join me in this fight.
Yeah.
There is 1 gargoyle that you fight.
That's true. Yes.
And like I said, gargoyles, tough, extremely tough. And I'm like, okay, there's he's doing poison damage, but I can do this. And then out of nowhere, coming through the waterfall is his tag team partner to come make your day miserable. And
that's Steve Austin's music.
Yeah, basically. And I think that's the coolest, like, I think it's the coolest moment in the whole game. Because at that point, you haven't really come across any other boss fights where there are more than one person.
Or if there are, they're there when you walk in.
There are, but they're there the whole time.
Yeah.
So I'm fighting, and all of a sudden I look over my shoulder, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? And he just comes storming through, and it was just like, we are here to it's basically that it's that tweet. The gang's all here and they hate you.
Yeah.
And they really hated me.
Yeah.
I beat that boss fight by accident. I got very fortunate, which apparently I did not know at the time. But it is a hard boss fight. The second gargoyle comes out when the first one is taking a decent amount of damage, gets that to like maybe a quarter, like half health, let's say.
Yeah, probably half.
This other gargoyle comes out and they're big and huge, and you are fighting in this like, basically at the top of a waterfall.
Yeah.
And so I was just fighting and rolling and rolling and rolling. And one of the times I did it, the second gargoyle came out and he went to attack me as I rolled, and he flew over the edge of the waterfall and died at full health. And I was like, thank you, miss, can I have another? And I then was able to, I had Diet with me at that point, and my Spirit Ash was still alive, and I was able to beat that fight.
Yeah.
But man, I think that's such a cool fight where you think like, all right, I've got a handle on this. He's at half health. And then it's like, oh no, you got a handle on nothing.
My problem like with those big boss arenas, it was just a thing that I would never use the arena. I would always just be like, I would walk in, and whatever the first like 20 or 30 feet that I was like walked in from the door was, that's where I would be like the entire fight. So that gargoyle fight was just all fought for me like right by the doors to walk in to the place, essentially.
I pretty much did that on purpose because I never wanted to lose runes. So I wanted to stay very close to the door.
Very close to the door.
Because there were some boss fights that would come in, and like if you got caught looking at them right off the bat, they would kill you. So and if I thought I was dying, I'm like, run back to the door. Yeah.
There's also the underground stuff is the first time you see those fucking ants, and like that cave system where you see the ants for the first time. I was like, man, like I don't like being here. I don't like being here at all. Like these ants aren't even that hard, but I just don't like being here.
I will say, we were talking before about like the level design, right? And how do you do level design? How do you do what Souls games do in an open world?
Yeah.
And like, sure, you have your legacy dungeons where you have your shortcuts and stuff. But the first time that you hit, I think it's Sophia River.
Yeah.
And you go down and you're doing the ant fight, and then you come across, I forget what the fight even is. I don't remember what you're fighting, but it's the first time you see a boss with lightning.
I think it's the Dragon Knight, the big huge like half dragon thing that like can't walk. It's just kind of like arms at you, but it's like shooting lightning and stuff. Yeah.
So like there's that giant fight, and then later when you are in I forget what area it is. Is it I think it's Noctron or whatever. You can look down into that arena.
Yeah.
Where you were 25 hours ago or whatever. And you're like, oh, yeah. I'm like standing right above that giant skeleton that was in the chair.
Oh yeah. Those giant skeletons in the chair. Yeah.
that I
Because
was
you
surprised
walk
I never
in
had
and
to
you're like,
actually
oh,
get up
this
and
must be
fight.
the boss. Like this thing's gonna come to
Yeah.
life, and then it doesn't. Like this other thing jumps out at you or whatever. But yeah,
But like that was just so cool to me, was being
Yeah.
like, oh look, I'm in the same area. It's
Yeah.
just I'm a little bit above it now. And
Yeah.
I thought that was super cool. And I'm like, that was 20 hours ago I was here.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
yeah. The underground is also where you find those fucking frogs, the big-eyed basilisk frogs that shoot death breath at you. And like I have like residual souls trauma from those things because in Dark Souls 1 they can give you what they call curse, which permanently reduces your health bar to half until you find a specific item that does it. And they obviously just kill you in this, so it's fine. But I still, whenever I see them, I get like anxiety from them because I'm like, yeah.
Bloodborne had a similar type enemy that would just lay that death on you, and I can't remember what the enemy was.
Oh, well, I don't think it was death. It was like the madness stuff, right? It was like those.
I feel like there was one that pumped up this one thing that would kill you.
Yeah, it was the
instantly when
Winter
it hit.
Lanterns, those ladies with the giant heads, you know, who would like give you like the madness or whatever. But yeah, so the whole area, like I liked the areas, but some of the ants, something that just bugged me out. How'd you feel about the underground stuff, Jake, in general?
Yeah, I remember the first time I went down into Suffer River from Limgrave, and that was like the first like mind blowing kind of spectacle of the game, and there was a lot of that. I think the majority of the like holy shit, this is like beautiful was in the underground areas. I think the first of the the what they call that, like ancestral spirits, the like deer zombie thing.
Yeah.
The first fight of that was awesome. It wasn't a particularly the first one wasn't a particularly difficult boss fight, but it was just like gorgeous. And then the second one, I don't know why I really struggled with the second one.
I struggled with the second one too, Jake. Same thing. I struggled with the second one as well.
Yeah.
And the music though is so beautiful in those boss fights.
Yeah,
it's so serene and calm. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
And they were like with Radahn, they were like massive arenas. So I kind of like walked the entire periphery, and then there wasn't anything there. But but yeah, and then going through it, then fighting the two gargoyles. That was the first like proper brick wall. That I hit was fighting those gargoyles. I really struggled with those. I didn't even think about just luring them to the edge and having them fly off. But, they were tough.
It was not intentional.
Really go. But I had to really go and like level up quite a lot before I went and faced them again. But when I did that, they were a really good boss fight. I didn't consider it to be like bullshit. Like there were some things in this game which I considered to be a bit bullshit, but that probably wasn't one of them. But yeah, and then like you were saying with the what was the name of the boss? The dragon guy, Dragonkin Soldier of Noxtella.
Yeah,
that was cool. That I can't remember the order that I did these. I don't know if this was before I did the gargoyles. I can't remember, but I remember I beat that guy first try, and I was shocked because he was like massive and like grabbing. And I was like, "There's no way I'm going to do this," and I beat him first try, which is pretty nuts. But yeah, like you're saying, and then you can see the rest of the city above you.
Yeah,
from down in that arena, and like being like, I know you can tell by the way that it looks, you can get there. And I was like looking around for hours trying to find out how to get there. And that was like one of the times that I had to look at the wiki just for like, how do I get to this place? And it's like, oh, this is actually part of this person's quest line, which is like 60 hours away. And there was a bit of that. So that was kind of like why I pursued Rani's quest line so heavily, was for all of that stuff. Just because it was just like gorgeous, and it was just really awesome spectacle. Yeah, which is kind of I think the best parts of the game were those like just big, just beautiful bits.
Yeah. When you're doing Randy's questline and you have to fight like the shadow of Blythe or whatever. It's like it pops. I had such a hard time with that fight, being a magic build at the time, because he moves so fast and it's really hard to hit him. I eventually just had to cheese him, which there's a thing where you can do where if you get him behind, like there's a pillar that's on the ground, and if you can get him behind that pillar and keep kind of like moving back and forth so he can never get himself around it, you can kind of just like hit him and then back up and hit him and back up, and he can still almost kill you because he's got like really powerful attacks that got like AoE. But I was able to finally get him because I fought him a ton of times, and I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I want to get past this point. But yeah, I loved the Astal fight. It took me a couple times, but I thought it was such a beautiful fight, and the enemy design is so cool. And when you get past them and you have that item from Renala, that chest in Renala's like room, and you go past them, you go up that elevator, and you're finally on that plateau that's above the rest of Lernia. You're like, oh my God, I did it. I'm finally here. I'm finally in this area I could never figure out like how to get to. It feels so good to get there. And getting the Darkmoon Greatsword is awesome. And I don't know if you know, I'm sure, Jake, I'm sure you've seen this since you've been doing it, but like that weapon is in every one of their games, the Darkmoon Greatsword. So
I've heard that, but it's like, kind of like a variation of it in each of their games, which is really cool,
And it's always a reward for doing something real cool. Like, it's just like what it always is for them. But I loved all that stuff. Deeproot the Deeproot Depths was fine. Like, I didn't like that it had so many fucking frogs in it. Like, I hate those things. And there's that one area you walk into where it's just like they're everywhere. Like, they're like the main enemy.
So I mean, the game is so big and so just so much to do. At some point, I took that coffin up and ended up in Deeproot Depths, and then I probably stopped that night. And before I stopped, I must have said, "Oh, I'm going to travel back to the Round Table Hold and level up or do something." And then I just forgot it existed. I forgot that entire area existed. I was like, "Oh, I did that." 40 hours later, I was just like exploring, and I'm like, "What's this Deeproot Depths thing? I did do this, right?" And I went down there, and I'm like, "I remember being here. I remember seeing these roots." And then I went through them, and I was like, "Oh, I never did this." And like, I went through that whole area, and I was like, at that point, I was basically God.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So those frogs came, and I was just like, goodbye. But that was like a cool area. Then you get to the boss fight of that area, which deals with Fia's quest.
Yeah, Fia's quest. Yeah.
And there's like all those summons that she like all those summons come in, and I was just like /1 sty, /1 sty, /1 sty, and I was like, okay, this was probably much more difficult. 35 40 levels ago.
I mean, that's not like the harder thing is when you go into like her like dream or whatever, and you fight the dragon thing. I mean, by the time I did it too, I was over leveled for it, so it wasn't like
I was way over leveled for it.
Super hard. But he was cool. He was a cool dragon though, with his like Sith powers or whatever. But yeah, that area is interesting. It's much more interesting once you like dig into the lore a little bit. It's like a cool lore area. But that is wait till you can skip the draconic tree sentinel that's waiting outside of Lindell Royal Capital for you to get in. Our buddy Andy just totally skipped that guy. He was like, "Oh, I'm inside the Capitol." I was like, how was that fight against the other guy? And he was like, "Oh no, I just warped in here." I was like, "You son of a bitch." I was like, that tree sentinel is so hard when you're trying to get into the
I just put I put Tish on that tree sentinel, and that tree sentinel went down real quick.
So like that's like the depths of. I mean, there's also Mogwin Palace. We didn't talk about Mogwin Palace. I don't know if did you do that, Jake? The blood area, basically.
No, I got teleported there as part of
RA's quest.
The
White mask guy,
and then and then I sort of like walked in, and then some skeletons appeared out of the ground, and I was like, I think I'll hold off for now. I was like, it was like, because he said like, "Oh, use this thing, but don't use it yet, because whatever."
Yeah.
And I was like, "I'm use it. Why don't you see what it's all about?" And then I think I got like one hit by something. So I was like, but then I think it was like another rot area, and I was like, I don't want to deal with this. So I haven't been back, but
that area is cool. I mean, the boss of that area is neat. Moog or whatever. It's a neat boss fight. And it's cool because you're just talking quickly. The reason I bring it up mostly is because when you're talking about like looking at a place and seeing it, like if you beat him, his arena sort of like overlooks like the entirety of the underground, basically. And if you walk to the edge and you look out, on one side you can see like the Eternal City and like the wilds or whatever, and on the right you can see the like the inverted tower in Lernia that you go down. Like you can actually see it like jutting out of the ground coming down. It's just very cool. It's like a very, very cool thing. It's a neat boss.
Rad.
Its boss fight is very cool. It also like it has some mechanics in there. Just like you're like, how are you supposed to combat this? Like he's a blood loss boss, basically. That's what he does. He all does blood loss stuff. It's a neat fight though. It's a good fight.
That was one of the ones I first saw early when the game came out of people figuring out how to cheese that boss.
Yeah.
And there is if you do some platforming, and I'm not sure how, because I tried it, I wanted to see if it could be done.
They patched it out.
After I beat the boss. So they patched it out.
Yeah, they patched it
but
out.
yeah, so like people were like jumping on pillars, and then they jump through an open window, which took you into the boss room and skipped the fog door. And people would just walk up and stab the boss in his ass while he was sleeping.
Yeah.
And they would never actually have to fight it.
Yeah. Because the boss door is what kind of initiates its AI, and as long as you don't target it, it doesn't ever like. So they just beat it for this person that got summoned in. It's interesting. It was a fun thing to watch, but they took that out. And then the next thing is the Altus Plateau, which is like the next big section of the game. And I after going through Caelid, I was like, is this how the rest of the game is going to be? And then when I got to Altus Plateau, I was like, oh no, like this is like being like a harder version of Limgrave, or whatever. And I really liked the Altus Plateau quite a bit, except for the area near the tree with the fucking worm face things that shoot death at you and make the most horrible sounds in the entire game. They sound like they're vomiting and crying the whole time.
That area was frustrating to me due to the verticality of the terrain, because you're like, I want to get from here to here, and it's like, oh no, there's this giant rock wall in front of me. I have to like get around and figure out, like, because there were like sites of grace that I had missed, so I couldn't like easily warp back to certain spots that I wanted to go to. So I would like have to like figure out my way around. I spent a lot of time in that fog with those upsetting sounding I did not like that at all. That area actually contains, not that specific area, but this part of the game contains, I think, like one of the harder boss fights in the game. Is Commander Nail.
Oh, that's in the mountaintop of the Giants. Yeah. That's in the mountaintop of the Giants.
No, that's not in the mountaintop of the Giants. That's in the that castle that is, you have to take that ravine down into. It's like, it is 100% not the mountaintop of the Giants.
No, because
they were very similar. The guy that you're thinking of is Elmer of the Briar.
Yeah,
it's like a one, and he's got like barbed wire all over him, and he's gross.
I'm looking at
Commander Nail is at the Castle Soul, guarding the other half of the Halig Tree medallion, and that's in the mountaintop of the Giants.
Really?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm looking this up.
Go ahead.
We're thinking of the same. I mean, both of those boss fights, both Commander Nail and that, they were tough boss fights.
Yeah, for sure.
You're right. It is in the mountaintop of the Giants.
I was correct.
Who's the boss fight that is in the that castle that's surrounded by the lake of poison?
That's Elmer of the Briar.
Okay.
He's the one who has the sword that like he can like basically shoot it out. Like it has like you're like in a tiny room with him, basically like a banquet room, and he has like a red sword, and it has like crazy range. Like it can do that castle. Fuck that castle in general. Anything with continuous poison, go fuck yourself, game. I don't want to deal with it. And it has clean rot knights walking around that castle, like a couple of them. Like then they're like, and those things are always hard. Like no matter what, they're always hard, shooting out their like halo things at you or stabbing you with their thing and giving you scarlet rot. Like those things are just so hard. But the Altus Plateau in general, like you walk there and they're like, oh, you remember all those things that were bosses in other places? They're just kind of like hanging out in the world now, and you got to fight them like as if they're normal enemies. And once you beat them, they still come back. Like they're just normal enemies now. Like that's like a lot of what Altus Plateau is. But I think like by the time I got there, I was like at the right level for it. So I was doing pretty well. Nothing was taking me too long. Definitely times I died for sure, but I had like a good time doing it. And that involved, obviously the Royal Capital is part of that area. Well, the Windmill Village is also part of that area. The Windmill Village is one of the weirdest areas in the game with those women who are dancing and laughing. And you got to fight the Godskin when you get to the top of that area or whatever. But that area, and then the capital itself, which I think is one of From's most like well designed and well thought out and coolest areas I think they've ever created. The sheer scope and size of what they did, and the amount of stuff that's you can do in it, like the amount of like you can get to the sewers. There's a replica of the Round Table Hold that has its own whole thing that you can do in it. There is an area outside the capital where you can walk up and go, and like that's where the elevator is to the other land or whatever, but there's more stuff to do there. There's side streets and buildings and, you know, all these other areas. Jake, you know, what was your sort of like impression of the capital?
I remember, I think you said that whoever it was you were playing with, sorry, I can't remember the name.
Andy.
But Andy, he ended up in the capital sort of like being teleported from Deep Root Depths. And I think I ended up being in the sort of same situation. I kind of felt like I was there too early. And so I sort of like, I navigated through a little bit and then kind of went back, and I ended up going around and trying to get in the kind of way that I felt was the proper way in, and then to face the Draconic Tree Sentinel. And that was a rough time. But yeah, but it ended up being that you ended up going in, like where you get teleported to and where you go in via the Draconic Tree Sentinel boss fight is the same area. So
yeah,
I ended up basically just wasting my time. But but it was yeah, that was another moment where you come out and then it's like that crack there's like a bit of the wall that's destroyed and you can see out into the city, but only like a chunk of it, and it's another just like spectacle. It's just and like you can see like the dead dragon, and you can see where you got teleported kind of earlier on in the game, and it's just more spectacle. But like going through, I found it like another like enjoyable area. I actually remember being I think I was a little bit over leveled for the first time I went into the capital itself, because there's the kind of bubble weird little bubble creatures. I thought that was a bit strange, but I was kind of one-shotting them, and the sort of I can't remember what the sort of like static giant things that shot sort of magic stuff out.
Like the half gargoyles, the gargoyles that don't have any legs, basically. Yeah. And that was all fairly easy, but there was the odd enemy that the kind of like hooded guys that sort of mill about. They were always pretty tough, and they've often got a crossbow,
like a crossbow that shoots fire out at you and things like that. They were always like the kind of barrier when I was going through Lanedale, and then the kind of the knights themselves, they were always pretty tough.
Knights are always tough.
So I found the sort of like the beginning going through Lanedale, I was like, oh, this is pretty easy. But then you get to the kind of the main street and the I can't remember the name of the boss. The kind of recurring.
Oh, the avatar. The avatar you're talking about?
That drops down, and I was like, oh, this should be fine because everything before me has been fine. And it kind of flattened me. That was another one where I like Lanedale because there was like a lot of obviously all of the legacy dungeons where you can go in so many different directions, but I felt like there were lots of ways just to go one direction and then loop back to where you intended on going, rather than being taken down a complete labyrinth of its own. Because there were lots of enemies in that area that were just really, really tough, that I was just like, I'm probably I'll come back to this, or maybe I won't. But it felt nice to be able to avoid everything, and I found it fairly a relatively quick process to get through and then get up, because then you fight the spirit
of Godfrey
Godfrey, and then you go up and fight Morgott, and I remember the Morgott fight being completely baffling to me, because everything before had been like a mix of pretty easy but also like really, really tough, like I'm gonna get one shot by these things, and I beat Morgott in my first try.
Oh, nice.
So did
I don't know, I have no idea how, but I was like, all right, cool. I think I was like had just got the Darkwind Greatsword at that point, so I was like just kind of flattening people and just like I respect to use that sword and stuff, and that was when I realized I'm going to use this until the end of the game. And
I was coming up to I was in party with Bobby and we were talking, and I'm climbing up those routes, and Jake, I kid you not, I had said, man, it's been a while since I've seen a boss fight or something so similar to that. And the Spirit of Godfrey fight started 1 second later. Like it just happened, and I was like, oh man. And I at that point I was over leveled. I think I was like 20 levels over leveled.
Yeah, you were
just like sheer exploration. And so I handled both of those fights, that and Godfrey's fight, like pretty easily.
Yeah.
Then I made the mistake of going into the sewers, which is my least favorite area of the game by a wide margin.
I was in the party with Justin, and Justin was like, is this just like a whole other world underneath this already giant world? And I was like, yes, it's a whole other, it's got its own catacombs. It's got its own bosses. It's, it's crazy. It's a crazy area.
So the sewers, when I went to the sewers, it was even bigger than I thought, because I didn't realize that you could jump off those pipes and land on a different, there was a floor that you could land on, and there was more there.
Yeah.
It was that game is so big.
I didn't touch the sewers until kind of the after Furabazula.
Okay.
Because there's one section in the kind of main street where it's just open, you could go down.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of enemies there, and I kind of I poked them a little bit with magic, and they kind of just chipped a little bit off their health, and I was like, I at this point I was like close to the end game, and I was like, I'm not prepared for a lot more of this. So I haven't really touched it, but I'll get to that on my next playthrough. I think.
You talk about a labyrinth. The sewers is a labyrinth because you are spend a decent amount of it in these pipes that look exactly the same, and you need to remember, where did I go? Which way have I been and I haven't been yet? And eventually you get to a boss fight that takes you down so far that I actually felt like a sense of dread. Like, I am so far underground right now, and you go into this church, and this area leads to one of the hidden endings of the game, like the crazy ending, the frenzied flame ending, right?
Yeah.
And boy, that even at my high level, that boss fight was not fun. But that area, sewers, is my least favorite area of the game by far.
Yeah, I explored the sewers only to the fact that I did like that area. Justin, you said you didn't know existed, which was like that because there's a talisman down there that's really good for blood builds or whatever. So I went to go get it. And that was a tough one for sure. It was a tough area. But yeah, I really like the capital a lot. Then they do this in other games, but I love when you find that the real world version of the Round Table Hold, which is really cool. And you're exploring it, and you're like, oh, here's the person who was invading me down here. They're dead on the ground, in the area of the Round Table Hold where they were invading me or whatever. Really neat, you find stuff where the blacksmith would be and so on and so on. I thought it was really interesting. And the whole area is just really cool. And I love, you mentioned the weird little bubble things from does a lot of weird little guys. They do a lot of oh, this is a fucked up little dude. And I just love, this game is full of them. And those are especially I don't get, and they can mess you up if you get too cocky with them. If you let them get their attacks off, they can mess you up. But in that area especially, it's more in one of the other areas of the game where they really become a problem. But in this area, they're totally fine. Godfrey was the same thing. I was like, I'm going up that dragon, going up those trees. I was like, okay, I'm going to walk in this room. There probably is a site of grace in this room, right? And then it's just boom, boss. And I happened to beat that boss on the first try. It's not a big deal because there is a America statue right outside that door or whatever. But I beat the boss on the first try, and then I actually had some trouble with Morgott when I was facing off against him. It took me quite a few times to beat him, and I actually beat him and died at the same time. I shot off I was doing magic at that point still. I shot off a glintstone pebble, and it hit him and killed him just as he was throwing, one of his things at me, and it killed me. Yeah. But because he died before I died, I got the rewards and I got my souls back or whatever. But and then you go to the mountain. After that's over, you go to the mountaintop of the giants. Before we go there, let's talk about Mount Gilmer, because we didn't talk about Mount Gilmer very much at all. We talked about Elmer of the Briar, which Isn't that terrible place? But the main thing in Mount Gelmir is is Volcano Manor. And there's several ways you can get to Volcano Manor. Justin mentioned one of them. We mentioned them, like, the invitation you can get to go there if you help this one person you find in Lernia. When you get off the Grand Lift of Dectus, she'll basically be like, "Hey, Tarnished, like, you want to go to Mount Gelmir now? You want to go to Volcano Manor now?" You're like, "Sure." She just warps you there. Or you can just fight your way there, and there are a lot of hands and area bosses and everything. You have to fight those death machines. There's a lot of hell to get there. When you get in there, though, it's a non-combat zone, and you basically get assignments from, like, them to go fight other, like, Tarnished. They're not real people. They're like NPCs you're invading or whatever. You're fighting them, or and that's why you can get an audience with the Lord of the Manor. Or you can, obviously you can find that secret wall and you can push your way through and go into the like area, and fight your way through the actual, like, regular dungeon area, to get there. Which did you do, Jake? Did you do this area?
I did, yeah. I kind of similar to with Leyndell. I faced it in two kind of sort of twice. I did the quest. Accidentally did the quest where you get an invitation. So I think it was in Liurnia, where I came across what was essentially there was an NPC. I think it was another Tarnish guy, and he essentially just told me to piss off, and he was really rude. So I fought him and I killed him just because I was like, "You're an asshole. You're not going to give me anything." So I killed him, and then I ended up coming across the woman that gives you the invitation, and she was like, "Oh, I need you to go and kill this guy." I was like, "Oh, I've already killed him," and then she gave me the invitation, and I met her at the top of the lift of Dectus, and then kind of teleported into Volcano Manor.
So if you did it the opposite way, if you find her first, you go to that guy and you're like, "Hey, I want this necklace back," and he's like, "Yeah, I'll give the necklace back. You just give me $1,000 or whatever, and I'll give it back to you." And then you can buy an item from him which is like these broiled prawns, which you eat them before a battle and it reduces your damage taken or whatever. It's interesting that you did it the other way around. Yeah,
I shouldn't have killed it.
Yeah, it's okay.
I never saw either of these people.
Yeah, I was like, he's being rude, and he's not. I'm not extending his dialogue anywhere, so I was just like,
you just kill him.
But it's fine. But I think you get his bell bearing thing anyway. So
okay, so you're probably fine then. Okay.
Yeah, and so I got teleported in there. I did the various sort of like conversations with all the NPCs, and then I sort of like went out into the dungeon section, because you go into various rooms.
Yeah.
But then there's, I think, one that goes out into sort of like the side rooms, and then went out into the main bit of the dungeon, and there was the snake things.
Yeah.
And they like one shot me, and I was like, I'm not leveled for this just yet. So I was like, okay, I'll hold off on this. I got all the lore and things that I wanted from there, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And then I went off and did whatever, and then I came back, and I actually went up via going up through Mount Gelmir, just because if I just went back to that site of grace and did it that way, I would miss out on all of this other stuff, which I'm really glad I did, because there's so much there.
Yeah.
But I thought the Volcano Manor as a dungeon, I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it like at all. I thought it was. I felt like that was the first bit. I was like, this is kind of bullshit. Like, there were lots of bits where enemies were kind of hitting me. The extending snake lizard things were hitting me through walls, and there was just lots of like. I felt like the enemies weren't properly built for the area that you were in, kind of thing. There was, I don't know. I think it might have just been me being bad at the game or whatever. But yeah, so Volcano Manor as a dungeon, I wasn't massively keen on. But the Rykard fight, I really liked. That was probably one of my favorite boss fights. That was really
really
cool.
Awesome.
But that was one where I went in like, kind of normally, and like threw some magic at him and like hit him with a sword or whatever. And I was like, he is taking no damage. Like, what? When are you supposed to do this fight? So I went out and I was like, oh, my light's just gone out.
Sorry, we were very mean.
And I was like, I don't know how am I supposed to do this fight? So I kind of had a bit of a search on the wiki. I was like, what level are you meant to be for this fight? And it was like, oh, just take this weapon that I picked up the weapon, but I was like, I haven't got a build that's going to use this. It's probably like really heavy strength. I'm not going to use this. And then it was like, oh yeah, just use that weapon. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it was just like, it was still like fairly tough, but you just did so much damage to it. It was like really good. It was just
Did you go back and level the weapon?
No, I didn't use it after that fight. Yeah.
So, well, no, what I did was I got the weapon and I was like, same thing. I was like, I'm not going to use this. But then I thought about it and I was like, they're giving me this weapon for a reason. And the guy in Volcano Manor said, kill him with the thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, this has to be the thing. So I got it and I took a run at him and like, I was like, oh, it's doing good damage. And then I was like, hang on a minute. And so I teleported back to the round table hold and took the weapon from like its base state to +7. And then I went back and did the Reichert fight, and it was comical how fast he went down when that thing gets upgraded.
Yeah, I didn't level the sword either. I didn't level the sword either. I just fought it.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah. It was awesome.
But if you spawn your mimic when you're holding the sword, the mimic spawns with it, and you can just like batter him up. The fight. Like the first part of the fight is once you learn it is not that difficult, right? When it's just the snake, but when he transforms and like the face is in first of all, the face in the snake's body, but also the voice actor just goes for it.
God.
Just goes for it. That little hiss in his voice when he talks to you. Oh, it's so good. I love it. But like when you get to that fight, and if you don't like stun him out of when he's doing certain attacks, he like opens up the sky and there's like skulls like raining down on top of you. You're running. The first time I did it, I was like, I'm running around. The sky is just like plummeting like these like red skulls at me. And I'm like, how do you do this? You know, I was like, I don't understand at all. But you know, it's a really cool boss fight. It's a really, really great fight. And if you go back did you go back after the fight was over? Did you transport back to the arena after the fight was over?
No.
So
I don't think I did either.
So what you do is like you go out, you can talk to Tanith right in the hall, and she's like, "Oh, you beat him, but like that's fine. Like that means he wasn't strong enough to be the Lord or whatever, you know." And everyone's cool with you beating him because they're all like, you know, strength is strength. But if you do that all talking to everybody, if you transport back to the arena, like the head is still there, and Tanith is eating the remains of Reichert to try to like take the serpent like god into herself. And you can attack her and kill her, and when you attack and kill her, that knight that's always standing with her, that crucible knight that's always standing with her, spawns in. You have to you fight the crucible knight. And you get like a item for doing that. Yeah.
The stuff that's just hidden is so cool.
Yeah, it's mad.
It's crazy. It's crazy. If you go through and do that whole dungeon, you have to fight a godskin like in the middle of it. I think it's the big fat godskin dude. Those guys are hard. They're very hard.
That was the achievement I was missing. I was like, what boss didn't I do? And apparently that was like that area. Like I never found that secret part of the wall. And so I was watching a video. I was like, what area is this? How do I get to it? Because on the map, when I was looking, I thought that the area that it was the area that I got teleported to when I was in Rhea Lacar's manor. I thought that was the area. So I was like, oh, I've already been there.
Oh, okay.
So I went back down there. Like that was the last thing I did, like for my save. I went back down there and I was just like, I looked at the Godskin guy the wrong way and he died.
Well, yeah, because you were very high level for him at that point. So once Mount Gilmer's cool though. Like it's got a lot of stuff going on. Like I love that moment where you're on the horse and you take like the spirit spring up and you land on in that crater, and then like the falling star beast is just there. And you're like, I guess I'm in a boss fight now. You know, I that moment's great. I love all that stuff. There's also a very useful tier for your physic there, which is it's the one that like stops all FP consumption for a time or whatever. Like that one's very good. Very, very good. So next is Mountaintops of the Giants. This is like this is where the game sort of starts. You know, there's stuff to do in Mountaintops of the Giants. Obviously, there's one or two catacombs. There's a couple of optional areas, but this is when the game starts to streamline itself. I feel like a lot more, where it's like it's much faster getting through areas as far as like what there is to do in each area. I mean, first you have to go through that like middle section before you get to the lift, where you have to like, it's very snowy and there's those little guys that are hiding everywhere and they're like, and they throw things at you. And then you're supposed to, you don't have to fight him, but the Blackblade Kindred shows up right before you get to the lift. You can just go past him. You can just ride past him into the lift. I fought him the first time I played the game and beat him, but there's that section. And then you get to the Mountaintop of the Giants. And this, Justin, is where your least favorite boss exists, Commander Nile,
That guy.
in Castle Sol, where you find the other half of the Haligtree metal to get up to do the like
Also,
secret area.
That's where I think the hardest death bird in the game is too.
Oh yeah, when you're right up to it, yeah.
I forget what status effects that death bird puts on you, because like there's just like 3 boss fights, well 2 boss fights on top of each other, because there's a Tibia Mariner in that area, and avoiding the giant skeletons he puts out of the ground, I rolled into the death bird fight with like 170,000 souls on me, and I was like, well, we're not losing these, or runes, excuse me. And so it took me a while to do that death bird fight, and then I was like, okay, look, there's a little castle, there's like a fort here. I'll save and I'll spend the souls. And I'm like, all right, let me explore this fort. And that's where I came across that Nightmare Man.
Yeah.
And whoo boy, that's a tough fight.
That whole place is tough. That whole place is tough. Yeah. It has that room, you walk into, and you're like, oh, there's nothing in this room. And then those albinurics in the cages like
start screaming.
And then these things just come out of nowhere at you. And like that section.
That room sucks because you have to run past it to get into the fight every time, which is not a problem. Except the last thing that spawns is like a Crucible Knight that follows you up to the boss door and would sometimes hit you as you came through the boss door, or whenever I called in my summons would attack the door. There was like 2 or 3 fights that this happened on. This was the first one that really started to annoy me. I'd be like, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
Because my summons is attacking the door. The commander spawns 2 Crucible Knights that hate you with a passion. And that fight took me a long time. Like, that was the one that really got under my skin more than any other fight, I think, in the game, where I was just like, I don't know how to beat this because I can't get my NPC companion to stop attacking a fog door.
Yeah. I would say that fight is way...
Sorry. I was so overjoyed when I got through that fight.
Yeah, that fight is way easier. That whole section is way easier if you are using magic at the time, because you can kill the albinurics in the cage and they'll never scream. And so none of those spirits will ever get summoned if you're able to do that. So that's what I would do. And then the Commander Now fight is way easier if you have like the Sword Knight and Flame or a Comet Azure, because you can like basically stand away from him and just lay a fucking pillar of magic into his body, and it will take him down. It's a hard fight regardless, but it's much more manageable when you're able to stay out of his zone, because a lot of his attacks are very like their area of effect, but they're a small area of effect, but they're very powerful. And if you can stay away from him, then it definitely helps. I mean, I'd say that area is the difficulty of that area is a precursor to the reward you get, which is the Haligtree medallion, which is when you get to that area is really the fucking like.
Before we get to the Haligtree part, did you take the invisible bridge?
Oh, what, to get to that tower? You mean like the backside of that tower? Yeah, that one rise. Yeah.
Well, Jake, you've probably never seen one of those before in the games, and
no, I haven't. That was. I was like reading the messages that were on the floor, and they were like, try up or something, and then I looked up and I was like, there was a message just floating in the air. I was like, what?
Oh, that's good.
So I sort of like gradually worked out and went around and kind of that was very cool. I really like that.
Yeah.
The first time we were playing Dark Souls 3 on stream, somebody came into our chat and was just like, just walk straight. And this was like I would like plummet to my death, and I was like, no, I'm not walking straight. And they were like, just walk straight. And it's hidden somewhere on the internet, but it's my reaction.
It's actually in the highlight reel that I have on the YouTube channel at that moment. Yeah.
Just walking forward and being like, what is this? Like, what kind of bullshit is this? Yeah. And so I saw everyone saying like, truth ahead, or whatever, walk. And so I finally found a use for those colored stones. Was I was just dropping them in places to see like, where's the edge of the bridge, and that's how I found the stairs going up. So that I kept finding the edges. I was crafting so many of those things that I'd like to go all the way up and stuff. I thought that was they had to add in an invisible road once.
Yeah, for sure. That
talk about the Haligtree now.
No, we got to talk about the fire giant before we talk about the Haligtree. We got to finish off the top of the giants first. Giant. So when I got to the fire giant, I was probably around a level like 95 95 to 100 or something like that, which is like a little below, honestly, what they like recommend for the fire giant, but not crazy. But with the build, I was running magic still at that point, but with that build, like this was the boss that almost broke me. I was basically like, oh, I really was hoping I'd finish this game, like, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't even get him to half. Like I couldn't even get him to that second phase. Like I was just like eating shit constantly. And like I was ready to be like, I'm done with this game. Like I can't do this, you know?
He was very frustrated.
I was very frustrated.
We were in party.
Yeah.
He was super frustrated. You took a break from it for like 2 days.
Yeah. Well, this is like, and you know, I was just like, eventually I was like, you know what? You're doing exactly the thing that you told everybody not to do, which is like, you're just beating your head against this thing. Obviously you need to go to something else, like go to something else. And so I finally did. I did two things. I respect into blood loss because I got that Rivers of Blood sword, and I just started exploring more again. Like I just, you know, I went around, I beat some other bosses, I did some other things, you know, and finally I went back. And then when I went back, I did it in I think 2 or 3 attempts or something like that. It's a big honking ass boss, and those are my least favorite kind of bosses in the Souls games. I don't like the spectacle is nice. It's huge. Like it is so big. But most of the time you can't see what's going on. Like when you're fighting it, you know, you're just hacking at its leg and like I think it's going to do the thing where it slams the plate down on my head. So I better roll away now, you know? And like, I think the second phase, which is when like the eye pops out of the stomach and it starts like spewing fire all over you, I think is like actually way easier than the first phase. But I don't know. How did you do against the fire giant, Jake?
I remember it being a really, really tough fight, but I remember I could get to I think I kind of had the opposite experience to you. I remember the second phase being much harder.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I'm not entirely sure. I couldn't really tell you why, but I remember being able to get to that second phase the majority of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was usually the case of when he lies down and then rolls like backwards.
Yeah.
And he would always just roll over me. And that's where I learned just to either be, I think you had to be on his like, I think it's on his left side, and then you'll generally be okay. But yeah, it was a tough boss fight. And I had the same issue where I agree with you that the larger bosses are my least favorite because the camera is the worst thing in the world in this game. But I think it was largely okay. I obviously I used my mimic here and then summoned, is it Alexander
the jar? Yeah,
summoned him. Yeah and it was annoying because like sometimes I was able to ride torrent and then sometimes I wasn't, and I didn't realize at that point that if you have summoned an NPC, you can't ride torrent. Like, that makes sense. But it was I remember it being a tough boss fight, and I remember it taking me a good few tries, but I didn't, it wasn't one of those ones where I felt like it was a brick wall.
Yeah, for me, that was my main brick wall.
I could see the end.
Yeah.
But it was just, it took a good few tries and just like properly working out just working out his signals and stuff from directly underneath him, because obviously it's really difficult to see what he's doing with his shield. Yeah. When you're like right underneath him.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I think what the games tend to do is like, when you have a run of successes, right? Like I up until I got to the fire giant, I was kind of rolling, right? For a lot of time. I was like rolling through things. I was using the magic. I was using the Sword Knight and Flame. And I was just like, tough things. I was able to just take them down fast. 'Cause that's what that build is kind of meant to do. It's kind of meant to streamline the game a little bit for you. And this boss just I wasn't able to use those tactics against it. And so it really was like humbling me. It was like, no, you can't just do the same shit over and over and over again and win. You can't do it. So I really had to learn like how to dodge some of those big attacks, like when he slams the plate down and like creates like the wave of ground. Like I, not having torrent, because I also ended up summoning Alexander the second time I went back to fight him, was actually better for me because I could never avoid it with torrent. I was never good at avoiding like the slam down, but as long as you just roll like right when the plate's hitting the ground, like when you're off torrent, you can dodge that like wave pretty well. And I got really good at dodging that stuff. And it was just, I had to learn the boss fight, but I had spent so long in the game not having to learn like the boss fights that it was like, nope, you have to learn this or you're not going to do it, So I tried to summon cooperators and like they would eat shit like really fast, and I was like, and I just had a really hard boss fight in front of me, so I had trouble with it for sure. Justin, you look like you wanted to say something about something. Nope. Justin has complained about the cameras in these games since the first day he ever played them, so that's
Jake, they are miserable. In this game, I thought it was better because a lot of the fights are in like more wide open spaces. There were fights in other games where it was just like you're in a confined space against something that's ginormous and sometimes in the air and you can't see anything. I knew I was overpowered because Bobby was like, let me know when you hit the fire giant. And I hit the fire giant and I killed him on my first try. I was like, I'm probably too strong for whatever I'm doing.
I'm like, what level are you? He's like, I'm like 160. And I'm like, okay.
Levels didn't really end up mattering in that next area that we get to.
So before we get to Farum Azula, Jake, did you go to the consecrated snowfield and to the Halig tree at all?
I went to the consecrated snowfields and I kind of navigated for a bit, and then I didn't get to the Halig tree. No.
Yeah. Okay. So
like, this is
to speak about this area. Both of these areas, the consecrated snowfield is also not an easy area, but it's big and wide open, so you can kind of ride around and avoid things.
You can't see shit there either for a while.
Yeah, no, the very beginning of it. Plus, you have to go through a really hard catacomb in order to even get there. You go through the lift, and it's like, here's the catacomb on the way, and I'm like, God damn it, can I just get here? And
but the money, I was getting like 40,000 souls because I died at the end of it, and I was like, oh, I died, and I looked and I was like, I had 40,000. I had just leveled. I went through there again. I came out with like 85,000 runes. I was okay.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff to do in the consecrated snowfield. I believe the consecrated snowfield is also where that walking mausoleum that shoots sky missiles at you is. Which is a real pain in the ass.
I avoided that.
Yeah. There's like a little fort up there that you can do stuff in, and there's some stuff in there. But you have to go to this place called like Ordina Liturgical Town, which is like this. Basically, is a town-sized Everjail essentially. You load into it. The town goes into you go into the Everjail of the town, and you have to light these like bracer. You have to light these torches, just like in like the Sound of Sorcery, except there are invisible black knife assassins walking around, and if you don't notice they're there, they will backstab you and kill you in one shot essentially. There is a torch apparently you can buy from a vendor that allows you to see them when they're walking up to you. I did not know that when I was doing it. That is a whole huge pain in the ass. That whole lighting those three things. There's also archers that are sitting on roofs that are like super archers that will kill you very fast.
And there's ladders you have to climb up while you're in their line of sight.
Yeah. Basically, this is all the game is doing right now is being like, look, where you're going is very hard. So we're going to make it very hard to get there. So you just can realize that what you're in store for. But regardless how hard all that stuff was, the Halig tree area of this game is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in a Souls game. The whole area. Like I was at level 140 or something when I got there. Like high level. Like end game level.
Something. When I got there, and it was still hard.
And you start out on these branches, like the branches of the tree, and you have to walk down the branches to get to like the main part where you're going towards. And it took me 10 tries to get off the branches of the tree. That's where they have all these little dudes with the horns, and a couple of the bigger dudes with the horns. They fuck you up because they're everywhere. They're multi-leveled. So you'll be fighting one, and all of a sudden, like 15 of those bubbles will hit you at once, and you'll die. And then when you finally get off of those branches and you get into the main area, it's just full of like boss level enemies. Yeah. Like we didn't even really talk about the Weaving Peninsula. The boss of Castle Morn, Leon or whatever, the guy, there's like 4 of them just walking around like the world, surrounded by other misbegotten, which are those like winged things with the weird big faces or whatever that you have to fight sometimes. There are those crystalline things. There are like there are multiple tree avatars walking around. You know, it's like it is crazy difficult. Like soldier knights, ton of knights, a ton of clean rot knights.
Who's the boss of that area?
The first part of it's Loretta, like the knight that you fight, like the real version.
Yeah.
The real version of the knight that you fight at the end of Carrion Manor. That was not hard. The boss was, I was like, this is easy.
The boss was not hard.
I was like, I fucked that boss up, and I felt so good about it because I was like, your ghost gave me so much trouble when I was in Carrion Manor. I kicked its ass. But so you fight that boss, and then you go to the next section, which is like the brace of the Halig Tree, which is like
that part.
Yeah. Which is like this multi-level thing where you're kind of like going down. Like it has like, you know, it's like kind of wrapping around the tree and you're going down. And it just has enemies stacked all throughout it. It has like a door you're supposed to get into, which is surrounded by archers, an avatar, a couple of knights. So there's another way to go around, but if you go around, you run into those crystalline things, you run into clean rot knights, you learn into those things that have like, that come out of the ground that have like 20 limbs that can like poison you. Like those things that once they start hitting you, you can't break out of their hits and you just die. There's those. There's another lake of rot that you have to walk through with those pest things in it that are shooting you constantly.
This is where Millicent's quest ends, by the way. Like all the way up in here.
Yeah, all the way up in here. And your reward for going through all of that is getting to Melania, Blade of Mikola, who is the final boss, who is a ludicrously hard boss. Like just like has like multiple attacks that can kill you like instantly, basically, if you get caught in them. She looks amazing. Like one of the coolest design bosses they've ever made. She's the one that's in all like the promo material with like that like kind of like Valkyrie helmet that covers her eyes and the arm that she puts on, and her arm has the sword attached to it. So like, you know, it's not even like she holds a sword, like she attaches an arm that also has a sword attached to it. And man, like
she heals herself when she hits you.
Yeah, she heals herself when she hits you. And she has an attack that can hit you like 700 times in a second, basically. So you can get her down to half health, and then she can hit you with this one thing, and basically her whole health bar is back.
If you get caught, it's a spin cycle. If you get caught in it, you die.
Yeah. And also, if she hits your mimic or your spirit summons, she also gets health back. So, it's a very hard fight. And, you know, this one has 2 phases. And I was in party with Justin. And I kept kind of like asking him like leading questions, like, "Hey, Justin, how far have you gotten?" He's like, "Oh, I think I got her down to about half." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, what? Okay." Like, and waiting for certain like cues, like you know, like auditory cues that he had reached what I was thinking he had reached, and he wasn't getting. I was like, I don't know if he's gotten there yet, but I don't want to say anything, you know, whatever. And he's fighting her, and he's like, "Oh, I think I did it," and I'm just silent. I'm just completely silent, and then he goes, "Oh no, I didn't do it." Because there's a whole second phase that, on top of all the things I already mentioned, Jake, she adds Scarlet Rot to the equation. Cool. So yeah, good. Yeah.
She has another insta kill move.
Yeah.
If you get caught by, it's over.
Yeah.
So I was about 160 something.
Mm-hmm.
And was this the night I beat the game? Because I was feeling myself after I beat her. I might have beat the game that night, but I was like 100 and let's say 65 or 6 or whatever. Because going through that area to get to her, the enemies you're killing are dropping 6,000-7,000 runes a piece.
Yeah.
And so I kept the golden scarab on almost the entire game, up until maybe the final boss fight, or 2. Where I was like, I guess I could take this off now because I don't probably need to level anymore. Which is why probably my level is so high, because I was running through bosses with the golden scarab on and getting 100,000 runes at each go.
20% more runes for every every kill.
So I for her, I think I took it off because I needed to survive. But what I did was I stopped using Tish and used my mimic, and the 2 of us with Rivers of Blood, like her first phase. If I could get her down, I could kill her if she didn't do the jumping move where she kills everybody. But the 2 of us, if we got her in a corner, me and my mimic would get her into the second phase like instantaneously, and then my mimic would just eat shit in the second phase so fast.
Yeah.
The only time I beat her is she never did her jump move, where I like there's an easy way to avoid it if you're calm.
Yeah.
It's like it's an easy step. It's like you roll forward once, back once, and to like the right once, and it will never hit you. But when it's happening, I can't be calm.
No, it's just ultimate panic. You see her, and she goes up in the air. It's like one of those long wind-ups. She goes up in the air, and she pulls her sword back, and you know it's coming. You're like, this is the attack she's about to do. I know it's coming, and you just panic. You just absolutely panic. You're like, roll.
And it leads to death every time.
Yeah.
But killing her felt really good. Like I honestly like, and look, I mean, this is the boss that has had tons of articles spawn about let me solo her and guys going in there, and like I beat it, and I thought it was a difficult fight. I don't think it's like the hardest from fight I've ever done, but a lot of that deals with I have my mimic there with me, and I'm like, go forth, my child, and die on my behalf as I poke at her in the ass.
Yeah.
And even then, it was still really hard. So, like, people who could do this fight without the mimic or anything, like, incredible.
Yeah.
I
watched a video of the Let Me Solo Her guy. Have you heard about this, Jake? The Let Me Solo Her thing?
Yeah.
So I watched a video of somebody who summoned them in. They actually got them. They summoned them in. They were so excited. So funny to hear them like react to it. They go and they just stand there. They literally just stand at the front of the arena, and this guy runs in, and he fights Melania with double the health because there's two people in the fight. And like he probably healed 3 times, like the entire fight. And there's a point where I'm watching it, and the guy has like, you can't even see his health anymore when you're watching, because when you watch the cooperator, you can see their health bar, but you know, it's like a smaller version of it, but I can't even see his health anymore, and he's not healing. He's just fighting. He's just fighting until he knows he has an opening to heal, and then he heals. But you know, it's a moment where you're like, "Oh, guys, got to heal," and you get your shit pushed in. You know, when you try to heal, and you're like, "Oh my god!" Like this person was like, "Nope, I'm not going to heal now. I'm just going to roll," and like they never. Like, I think they got hit by like one part of that jumping attack one time, and she did it like 7 times against him. It was crazy. It's I mean, yeah, if you get caught in one of, like, the only move that would really get me was that one move, that like waterfowl dance, or whatever it's called, it's called her move. All the other big moves, I figured out how to dodge and to get out of the way of. It was just that one move, and when I started doing it, I was like, well, this is the time for next, cue up the next run, basically, is how I would feel about it on this one. She's a very hard fight. I mean, that whole area is just the whole area is a nightmare. It's like a living nightmare to get through. It's so difficult. It is like one of the classically hard, like, from areas that especially in this game, because also it's very tight. Every place you're fighting in that place is very tight. You're on a walkway walking down this like one thing. You're on a tree branch. You're on a roof. You're on a whatever. It's all very tight. So that's what makes it more difficult. And that Millicent's quest, which you can end, you get this really great talisman, especially for a blood build. You have to fight another one of those ulcerated tree spirits or whatever that shoot scarlet rot in this arena that's the size of the boss, basically. Like it's like the boss barely fits in the arena. So it's
and it's also like, if you fall off the arena, you land in scarlet rot.
Yeah.
Like it's like you're fighting in a lake, and you basically have like no room to maneuver if you to not stand in the lake.
Yeah.
So I stood in the lake and just kept healing myself over and over. Like, I will do this. It's cool.
Yeah.
If you're a magic builder, or ways to more approach, you can send like a tree branch and just shoot down at it and kill it. But that area is really hard. It's very cool looking, very well designed. Like, the lore behind it is really neat, and she's such a good, like, the boss design is just fantastic. And when she transforms to her second form, it's also amazing. Like, it's something you should definitely see if you're playing the game, if you put that time into the game. But it's very, very hard. But the next place we go after the Mountaintop of the Giants, we have well, depending on what ending you're going for, but most likely you have your maiden burn herself to kind of light the tree on fire, and you get transported to Farum Azula, which, if you haven't gone through the 4 belfries, is the first time you're seeing it. And to me, just visually, this is the coolest thing in the game. Like, the way it looks, like this crumbling fortress in the sky with this like eternal tornado rushing around it and like, I don't know, 100 dragons flying around it at the same time. It's like, it's insane. It's insane. So when you got transported here, Jake, this is the first time you saw it, right? Because you never found the Four Belfry stuff. So
no, yeah.
How did you feel like when you got there?
It was, that was like another, like, just holy shit, this is amazing kind of one of those situations. It was, I think the best thing about it was just so like the game kind of teleports you to an area just what feels like completely randomly, and then just like slaps you in the face with this really cool spectacle. And that was probably like the kind of most impactful of all of them, just because it's completely like, it feels like you're in, I don't know, like heaven or hell or some sort of death realm or something. I don't know, but it was, it's just, it's so striking. And I actually kind of wondered whether it was the capital, but like destroyed and brought up into this thing. I don't know if that, at the time I was like, could this be the story behind it? It's not, but yeah, it was just another one of those, just like completely like stop and just like look around and be like, holy shit, this is incredible. And then going through it, and I think that I can't remember what the beast men of Faramazula, the little creatures, and they were like fairly tough. I think going through that first bit, I died a couple of times, just sort of like learning their patterns and things, but it wasn't too bad. And then you come out onto the top of that sort of like arch kind of area, and the dragon swoops down. I love it when the dragons swoop down, just because it's, again, just more spectacle. Like, I love the spectacle. But I tried to fight it, and just couldn't do it. I think I killed one dragon in the whole game, just because they are just so beefy and they just take so much damage. So I kind of ran past him.
Yeah.
And then it was
So
it was,
I'm guessing then, Jake, that you didn't find the hidden boss in this arena in Faramazul.
What is that? I can't remember the name of it, but the dragon
Lord. Yeah, the thing where you have to go
find it. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
I didn't
Oh,
fight
wow.
it, but I found it. I didn't. I kind of had a couple of attempts at it, and I was like, maybe not.
Nice.
But this was like kind of, I'd been playing for like 90 odd hours at this point, and I was just like getting a bit like, I think the game was fantastic, but I did get a little burnt out. And I think this was the point where I felt really burnt out, and I didn't want to do any kind of like side stuff. I just wanted to sort of like get through the game.
Yeah.
And that's why I like kind of avoided doing the Halig Tree, and I avoided doing like the rest of the consecrated snowfields and like the sewers in Landell and things like that. I just didn't want to do any of that side stuff. I just wanted to do stuff that I had to do.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because I obviously I will play the game again at some point, and I will do all that stuff. But it's just like it's a lot. It's a lot to.
It is a lot.
Game.
Yeah. Well, some of the stuff, just so you know, like when you finish the game, it doesn't force you to go into New Game Plus right away. You can like basically load in right back to before like you fought the final bosses, and go do stuff. And that's kind of how I clean stuff up. I didn't fight this Dragon Lord until after, neither did Justin, until after we both finished the game.
I didn't know he was there, because he's not an easy boss to find.
No, and that's one thing like that's so amazing about them, is like they have this epic, amazing boss fight, and it's completely hidden. You have to drop off the side of the map, find a way down, go lay down in this spot. Time, there's a big cutscene, time freezes. You get this, this giant two-headed dragon who's fighting you. It's just like insane that they're like, most developers would not like have like the patience or like the like confidence to be like, we're just gonna, if people find this, great, they'll be rewarded for it. But if they don't find it, whatever, like that's fine. It's crazy that they do that stuff.
Jake, I hit the, like, right around this point of the game, I hit that like same thing where I was like, I was telling Bobby, it's like, I love this game probably more than most other video games I've ever played, but I'm ready to see other video games again. Like I want to like see something else. So it was after I beat Mikola that I went to Farum Azula, and then I stayed up till like at that point it was probably like 11:30. I was like, I stayed up till like 3 a.m. that night, and I beat the game in one sitting. I was like, no, we're doing this now. And from this point on, like when you get to Farum Azula and you get through it and you get to the boss at the end of it, you are basically in a boss rush until the game is over. Like you could go back and explore other people, but if you stay on the critical path, you are just hitting boss, game over.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool.
There's another thing too, like I got to this area and I was like, oh, this is probably gonna be a really straightforward area. It's probably just gonna be like, it's gonna really push me along a path and just take me to the end, take me to the bosses, and then we're gonna get to the end. And there is so much optional stuff in Farum Azula. You can go to this area where you end Alexander's quest, like the Jar guy's quest. He's in there, you fight him. Like there's a couple of areas, like there's the boss we mentioned. It's just crazy that at this point in the game, they're still like designing the levels and the way they're designing them. But you get to the Godskin duo, which is the mid boss, which like. It's one of my least favorite bosses in the game. It's hard, but it's also just like one of those things where it just feels like sometimes they do this where they're just like, I don't know, a boss, but now there's 2 of them. You know, they kind of do that, and those are my least favorite bosses that they usually do. It's just like, okay, like this is hard just by pure numbers standards, not really because the fight itself is like, you know, is fun or interesting or has great mechanics. It's just like. And the fact that like it's not like you have to like fight them multiple times because like it's not like you kill them both and the health bar's gone. They start coming back and it's not a great fight. And plus the run to it sucks because there's like these incredibly difficult enemies that stand in your way in the fight. And like you can run there, but if you run there, it's one of those times where like your fucking summons will attack through the door at people because those people are right by you. It's fine. Like it took me a couple of tries, but I did it. But the final boss of the area, Malekith, Jake, you texted us the other day about Malekith. Why don't you tell me about your experience on that one?
There are a few moments in this game where I felt like I was hitting a wall, but I could see a way around it through leveling up or whatever. I could not see myself beating this boss. I thought I could go and I could level up 100 more levels and I could still not beat this boss. Like I thought this was it. I genuinely thought that was it. The first phase was fine. It was tough, but there were ways that I could get around it. You know, like obviously I was always summoning my my mimic and trying to use the pillars to sort of like take that opportunity to heal and like get a little hit and then hide behind the pillar and various things like that. So the first phase was fine, and then the second phase was just I cannot tell you how many. I think I did it on, when did I do it? I don't know. When did I text you? It was last weekend, right?
Yeah.
It was like Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah.
And I think I spent a total of probably about 8 hours on this one boss, and I felt like I was going
That's
insane.
a tough roadblock.
Yeah, it was, and I don't know how I ended up beating it. Like I kept on trying, and the first few hours were tough because I was trying to run past the draconic tree sentinel that's right in front of it.
Yeah,
and he kept on hitting me through if you stand, because I would stand the other side of the fog door and summon like straight away as soon as I got in, and then heal. And he was hitting me with his fire breath, the draconic tree sentinel hitting me through the fog door. And I was like, I have to kill this guy first, because otherwise it's just going to make the whole process so much more stressful. So that took me loads of tries. That was fine. That was like one of those boss fights where it's hard, but you can see what you're doing. But yeah, and then the Malekith section of that boss fight was just like how anyone is doing this, I don't know. It was he was just so fast, and hit was so, and like the fact that every time he hit you with a sword, it would like cut your health down. I was just like, I think I just got super lucky when I actually beat him, because I summoned my my mimic, and he was just focusing on the mimic, and I was able to just get like with the Darkwing Greatsword, you charge it up and you can fling some R2s at it, and I just got super lucky because the damage that R2 does, if you fully charge it, it does crazy damage. Like on the final boss, I think it was doing like almost 2,000 damage per hit. But it's just like because he's so fast, you just can't get those hits off. So I just ended up getting lucky that he was just purely focusing on my mimic, and I was able to just get the odd opportunity to get one off, and it was just like, oh, like I've never slammed my controller in anger at any game ever. I did it so many times during this boss fight. I cannot.
Malekith gave me trouble as well, and same thing as you, Jake. I kept trying to run past the tree sentinel, and eventually I was just like, I spent probably an hour or two one night trying to beat him, and I was running past, and I was frustrated. I was like, hey, I'm just gonna put this down. I'll pick it up tomorrow. And I picked up the next day. I was like, I'm just gonna kill the tree sentinel. I'm just gonna do it until I kill it, because I can't. The part of the frustration of this whole situation is I have to run past this thing, right? Yeah. So I felt like I beat. It took a lot of time to beat that thing too, because like that fire attack that the horse does, it drove me crazy. Because like if you don't dodge, like roll forward, like past it, the even if you dodge out of the way of the actual fireball, the area of effect will hit you. So, but this is right when I switched to the blood build. So I was like, I finally was able. I just like amped myself up and ramped to it and did so much damage to him, and before he was even able to hit me, that then I was like, I'm just gonna manage the fight from now on. I'm just gonna sit back here. I'm gonna manage the fight, and I was able to do it. And then with Malekith, for me, and Justin can vouch this, when you're doing a bleed build, if you proc bleed, you can do an insane amount of damage extremely quickly. Like you'll be hitting it, all of a sudden it'll just be like their health bar will be gone. And so if I was able to get a run of hits on the first phase of the beast, like the beast man when he was the beast clergyman, I could take that phase down in 30 seconds. Like just like me and my mimic going at it one together, like gone. But just like you said with Malekith, I would die before I was even able to like realize where I was sometimes, because he was so fast. He would get me in that combo. So what I just started doing was I just ran as soon as the face started. I would run and hide behind a pillar and just hope that like only a few of his attacks, or maybe like the residual of the attack, would hit me, and then my mimic would have time to get there and start attacking him, because I could do as long as I could attack him, I could do an insane amount of damage insanely quickly. But like and so finally the time I beat him, I just got, like you said, I ran, the mimic absorbed it, and I just was like, I just got in there and was like, and started chunking out his health, ran away again, let it happen again, let him do like all his jumping around, all his crazy shit that he was doing. And once he landed and started to like focus on, the mimic, I ran in there and like, and hit him and finally killed him. But it took me that boss fight took me a lot of time to get him. And I think those bosses are a lot of times are created for the fact that they don't want people to be able to power level out of that boss fight being hard. So like, no matter how big your health bar is, like if you don't play this, if you don't find a way to get around this, you're going to die essentially. And I think that's probably why they do it like that. Whether that's fair or not, that's very much up for discussion. Justin, did you have trouble? I don't even remember how your Malekith was at this point.
It took me like 7 tries.
Okay. I mean, that's a lot for where you were at the game at the point.
Yeah, my problem was the tree sentinel, because I couldn't. I never fought the tree sentinel. I would run past him every time. I didn't want to waste the health files. So I would then try and spawn my mimic right at the doors open again, or Tish, and he would fight the fog door, and I would get hit by the sentinel. So I started the time I beat him, I changed my strategy. I was like, I'm just going to run into the arena. Yeah. So that way my mimic or my summons is not distracted by the tree sentinel outside the door. So I went behind a pillar. I got hit like once. I called in, I think it was Tish. Because when I was really struggling with something, I would call in Tish, because that one attack he does that puts that bleed on, and where it like starts evaporating the enemy's health. I put him out. I got behind him. I got him into the second phase kind of quickly. And he was down pretty far. I think he was missing like 3/4 of his health, maybe a little bit less than that, or a little bit more than that. So somewhere between 3/4 and half. And then when he went to second phase, I was like, I'm just keeping my distance until I know I have an opening. I'm not risking anything. And Tish was still alive and doing work. Yeah. And he just kept he kept getting hit by Tish's like big attack, and his health started like plummeting. And then I was like, fuck it, I'm running in. And I took my sidekick where I would be able to absorb one hit, went in there and just hit Elsu a bunch and killed him. But it took me, but I was at level like 170 at this point of the game. Yeah. And it still took me a bunch. Like he was the hardest fight in that, like in that back half where I was like in this boss rush. He was by far the hardest fight. I didn't even think the last fight of the game was that hard compared to him.
Yeah. Totally. You get a really sick cutscene in between the two phases where he pulls that sword out of his arm or whatever. It's a very cool. Yeah. So at this point though, you get the Rune of Death and it loads you back into the capital, but now it's Lindell, capital of Ash, and the whole thing is like partly burned down and covered in like this thing of ash, and it's a very cool moment. And I think the game knows you've just gone through like a fucking gauntlet, because the rest of it is just literally like you're just walking between boss fights essentially. And the first fight you have is against Gideon Ofnir the All-Knowing, which is like a joke of a fight. It's a joke of a fight. Yeah. As long as you're able to, as long as you like, you don't, I've watched people fight him and had trouble because they are not super aggressive. They'll like kind of hang back waiting to see his attacks. And he has some attacks that are pretty powerful if you're not like being super aggressive. But with the bleed build, I was just like, nope.
Oh my God, he was a joke.
I was like, I'm just going to hit you.
I didn't let him get an attack off.
No,
I just kept rocking him.
Yeah, no. But me and my mimic were just like, and he was just dead. And then after that, you go back up to the throne. And this time you're fighting Godfrey, like the real ass Godfrey. No shade of Godfrey anymore. And with I've done all these fights 2 times, right? Because of I played it 2 things. Funny enough, like the first time through the blood build version, I think I beat Godfrey in one attempt. I think it was one attempt. With my pure strength build, it was way harder. It was way harder because I wasn't able to proc damage super fast. I had nothing at range. It was just like I had to be in there. And when he switches to his second phase where he kills that lion or whatever on his back and he covers himself in blood, he does a lot of like these like scream attacks that put out these like huge area of effects that knock you back. And I had to be right up in him, right up on him the whole time. So it made it difficult. But he has, I think it's a cool boss fight. How did you do with it, Jake?
Yeah, that was one of the ones that was a tough one. It took me a good few attempts, but it was fine. The first phase I could do like in no time. Just because I felt like his attacks were quite visible and they were quite slow. Like because the R2 with the Darkwing Greatsword takes such a long time. He gave plenty of opportunity to hit those. Particularly if I spawned my mimic and he focused on him, I could just like pretty much hit him, get him to his second phase in about 3 hits. But the second phase was tough because a lot of the time I had to get close to him, and if he does that grab where he grabs you and chucks you in the air and slams you down, that would kill me in 1 hit. But yeah, I think it was kind of. I think my strategy was mainly just use the mimic again. Hopefully he aggroes to the mimic, and then in the odd little gap, I can hit him with my R2 and kind of like he was actually quite easily stunned, which was quite nice because I would use Rock Sling. I think for most of the like later boss fights, it was a case that you could hit if you hit all 3 of the rocks that you use with Rock Sling twice, and I had the Great Blade Phalanx. So if you hit all 3 of the rocks twice, and then hit all 3 Great Blade Phalanxes, that would stun them. And then you can. So that was kind of the strategy for the. That was. I think I worked that out with Malekith as well. I think that was kind of like if I can get those off, then I can stun him and you know go and stab him. But and that was largely the case for Godfrey as well.
Yeah. So that rock sling.
I remember that being a tough. Sorry, I remember that being a tough boss fight, but it was good. It was good fun. It was like it wasn't like overwhelmingly frustrating. It was good. It was good time.
Yeah, those are the kind of boss fights I really like in from games where you're kind of like you're learning a move set and you're figuring out like the right way to avoid and the right times windows for attack, and it's not like so aggressive that it's always right up in your face all of the time, and it seems to like have like specific like windows and animations that you can really exploit, or if once you learn them. Yeah, it was a good fight, like not super hard, but like right in a nice sweet spot, especially for where it was. I was mentally at that point in the game trying to push through it to the end. But yeah, Justin, I'm sure you did that night, so you probably didn't have much trouble with it, right?
I got him on the first try.
Yeah. There's this weird thing too where like you get something on the first try and you feel like good about it, but it's also this thing where like sometimes I feel like I like almost I cheated myself sometimes with some of like the bigger bosses because I'm like I didn't get to like learn what the boss was. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's so many bosses in the game. There's so many bosses in this game.
At that point, I did not care. I was like, I am doing this now. And so I was thrilled. Because it was getting late out too. And I was like, I have work tomorrow. So I should really not be doing this. But yeah, I was thrilled to get him that soon.
And then you get through him and then all that's in front of you is the final bosses of the game, which is, Radagon of the Golden Order, and then the Elden Beast. So, and it's two bosses combined into one boss fight. You have to do it every time. If you lose, you don't, because there have been previous games I've done where they've had like 2-phase end boss fights where it's like 2 different bosses, and after you beat one, you don't have to do that one again. You can just do the second one or whatever. But this isn't like that. This is a double boss fight. And you know, as far as like final bosses of from games have gone, I think it is really, really strong. I think it's hard. I think it's difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. Like I think it forces you, especially with Radagon, you really have to learn the attacks well enough so that you can have enough health items when you get to the second phase to survive, and your summons is not dead. Because that's a very important part of getting to the second part of the fight. So learning, that was the biggest stopping point for me, was just like, it took me a fair amount of tries, but like learning like how to dodge some of Radagon's like area of effect stuff and some of his like big hits. Once I started to put that together, I was able to progress to the next phase in a much better shape and then kind of take it down. At this point, Justin and I have done the Radagon fight a billion times because we're trying to help our buddy finish it, and that fight is so hard when you have multiple people in it. It's just so difficult.
And unfortunately, we are all similar builds at the time. We're doing similar things, so none of us really were proccing any sort of weaknesses. Not that he has it many, but yeah, it's crazy how much harder the game gets as you bring in more people.
But I mean, I think it's a very good end boss fight. Like it feels worthy to be at the end of this very long game, but it's not like Millennia or Malekith where there's like this kind of like bigger bullshit aspect to it. Like he has like one attack. He has one attack, and Elden Beast has one attack, which I think is like really hard to dodge. And I'm kind of like, I don't know why this exists, but other than that, I think they're pretty solid. Jake, you're still attempting to finish this fight, correct?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, it's I like what you were saying about trying to like learn Radagon's attack pattern and stuff like that. I've got to a point with him a couple of times where I'm not summoning my mimic for him because obviously I think it's more important to have it for Elden Beast. But I just haven't. I've got so close. I've got him down to like a sliver of health on my own without my mimic or anything, but I just can't finish that fight without my mimic. You know what I mean? And like if I do spawn my mimic, I then go into the Elden Beast and it gets like absolutely flattened because it's only got a little bit of health left. So it's just like I'm trying to, and that's what like any sort of like guide that I've looked at about this fight is just saying like try and be as clean as possible with the Radagon fight, so you can go in to the Elden Beast fight with as much as many like flasks and like your summon as possible. But I'm just struggling with that. Like I could do the Radagon fight like at least every other try, as long as I get my summons off and stuff like that. But yeah, going into the Elden Beast fight, it's really tough.
Yeah.
It's a tough fight.
Really tough.
It's a fight. And the Elden Beast has like the toughest stuff for the Elden Beast for me was that kind of rain of stars that it puts down on you, those gold stars. And then that one where it puts like it says like a couple of little stars, but then one big like orb that like tracks you around. That one I have no idea how you like unstick it from yourself without letting it hit you. Like I don't think I've ever escaped it without it hitting me. But the Elden Beast, I think, like you said, it really comes down to the fact that, like, with me, with the mimic and or like spawning in my spirit summons, whoever you're spawning in, I just had to think about it differently. Like, usually I'd be like, okay, just kind of let like the mimic take the aggro and I'll jump in and do stuff. But in order to get through it, I really had to sort of like trade aggro like a lot more. I had to be like, okay, I will use the mimic as like my kind of like shield, like when I really just need to get out and heal or something like that. But for the most part, I kind of reversed our roles, which was, I was like, I'm going to be in there, like right in the face of the boss, doing all this stuff, and then only use the mimic as sort of like the distraction when it's absolutely necessary. And that's what helped me with it. And really, some fellow contributor to this site, Sky, she told me, she's like, the key is with Radagon's attacks, dodge to the right. Like, all of them almost are like, you dodge to the right, and that's the way that you should dodge when he's trying to attack you. And
okay.
When he's doing his slams down and creating those areas that affect things, it's actually better to jump than it is to roll, because you have more iframes when you're jumping. You have to still time it right. You can't just jump willy-nilly, because sometimes if you jump too early, you'll come down as the thing is popping out of the ground. You'll still get hit. But if you jump like just as it's coming down, you'll avoid it, and you'll have a lot of iframes. So I started doing that, and that stuff really helped me get through the Radagon fight. And then it was just about like, how long can my mimic survive the other stuff, to really do it. It was like, the stuff that would always get me was like, it would shoot stars at me, and then it would be like a million miles away from me, and also shoot those like the sword beams at me, like those like waves of energy. That's what would always fuck me up with the Elden Beast. But you're close, you'll get it. You'll absolutely get it.
I'm sure I will. It's again, it doesn't feel like as much of a brick wall as I mean, it is physically, but not physically, but like it has been.
Yeah.
More of a brick wall than Malekith was, but it doesn't feel like as much of a brick wall as Malekith felt.
Mm-hmm.
Like going in, like I felt like beating Malekith was just pure luck, whereas I feel like there is a strategy that I can work out to do this fight properly.
Yeah.
But it's just getting there.
And when in doubt, you just got to get up in that ass on those big bosses. You just got to get up in there, get it behind it, and just start like wailing on it. Like that is something that is just the answer to the game. Especially if you have your spirit summons alive, because you're necessarily going to draw all its aggro. It's not going to necessarily. And the Elden Beast doesn't really have like a lot of big bosses. When you get behind them, will have some sort of like spin around move where they'll like smack you with their tail. The Elden Beast doesn't really have that move. It'll most likely just like dive underneath the ground and come back up far away from you. So it's actually a pretty safe place to be most of the time. And sometimes, honestly, I don't know if you do this, Jake, but unlocking from the boss, like especially big bosses, can be really helpful, because the camera won't freak out, and they're so big, if you're up close to them, it's not going to matter. You're still going to hit them. So just quickly, Justin, you took the Ranny ending, right? At the end of the game.
Ending.
Yeah. You have some options at the end of the game when you get to the ending, Jake. One of them will be like summon Ranny in, and that will do her ending, or you can walk up to like this thing and interact with it. You can also travel away and do stuff before you initiate whatever the ending is as well. So there is that as well. So yeah, that's through the game. Like we went through the entire game. I'll say quickly, like my favorite NPC stuff, I liked the Millicent stuff, I liked the Ranny stuff, and Alexander was great as well. When I say Ranny, I also include the Blythe stuff in there. I thought that stuff was really interesting and cool as well. He was a really cool character. So I think they'd have some really good side quests in this game, which is really nice and really neat.
That's what I'm most excited for with another playthrough, is just doing the other quests, because the ones that I actually completed were Rani's quest and Alexander's quest, and that was pretty much it. And I didn't really interact with the other quests, bar maybe a couple for a few sections, but largely I didn't really interact with many other quests. And I think that comes a lot with, like, I guess it's maybe experience with previous Souls games, but the way that the quests work, it's kind of, it feels like it's supposed to be kind of like a natural way. You encounter them as you go through the game. It doesn't tell you where people are going to be, but you'll probably encounter them at some point. And that's like the way that it's designed, and that's obviously something that I'm not necessarily used to with other games. Most of the time they get the location of the next section of a quest is signposted. You have a quest log and things like that. So I think the next playthrough will be a will be a good one, and hopefully I'll be able to appreciate all of those NPCs a little more.
Yeah, the game is definitely, their whole design philosophy is definitely willing to let you miss things. Like they will, they are not interested in like forcing you to see everything they've designed. And I know that can be like a mixed bag, you know, for everybody, you know, and especially I've seen it struggle for a lot of people who are new to them, because they'll sort of like just dive into the game like they would do any other modern game, right? And just they expect the game to sort of like at some point go like, no, just do this or do that, or like point them in a way they're supposed to move, or signpost, this is important, do this is important, and they just don't do that. So I guess we're gonna wrap it up here, but I guess taking as a jumping off point, Jake, how did you feel about the game as a whole, and your first experience with one of these games?
I thought it was like, probably, like, speaking objectively, as much as you can when you're talking about your opinions on video games, I think it was objectively probably one of if not the best video game I've ever played. Whether it was the best experience with a video game, that's like a whole nother question, just because there were so many points where I just got so frustrated. But then the bits that were great, like the exploration and, you know, interacting with various NPCs and all the discovery of the game, which I think is probably the main should be the main like drawing point of the game. That was the best open world exploration of any video game, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, any final thoughts on Elden Ring?
It's probably in the top 10 best video games ever played. I think it's actually pretty firmly there. I don't think it's perfect. I think that the game ranks so highly on my own list, and sometimes in spite of itself, in spite of my feelings of some of the From games. But the highs of this game are just some of the best highs I've ever felt playing a game. And Jake is right. I think it's one of the best open world games I've ever played. There are lessons from this game that other developers should absolutely emulate. And yeah, I'll eventually grab and play this thing again. I need a little bit of time to pass. I'm not like you. I can't just jump back into another 40 hours or whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, it surprises me just as much as it surprises you, to be totally honest. I'm not the kind of person who replays games like at all, let alone immediately after I finish it the first time, you know? Yeah, it's absolutely spectacular. I mean, yes, there are ups and downs, you know, in it. And in a game this big, I think it's impossible not to have, you know, ups and downs when you have so much to go through. But, you know, I think in many ways, like, you know, people compared it a lot to Breath of the Wild when it first came out. That was a big touchstone for it, because I think because of the openness, the ability to explore, the ability to let you kind of like just do what you want to do. And they're very different games. Obviously, the Legend of Zelda is not going for the level of difficulty or the level of intricateness that From is going for. But what I would say is, like, I think that in many ways it tops the Breath of the Wild in just how much there is to do in the world, and the biggest thing is that it, like I mentioned very at the beginning, it takes all the things those games did well and retains them in this game while expanding upon and blowing out a lot of other things and doing things they've never done before. And that is the triumph to me, is that you can still get the experience you got in those smaller games, but there's also a very big game all around it. And, you know, the fact, Jake, that you were able to, even though obviously it's a hard game, it's a very difficult game. And, you know, but the fact that it's that difficult and you were still able to make your way through it, like, that speaks to, I think, the triumph of their design for this game. A way to make a game that is just as hard as the previous games that they've made, in some ways harder in some aspects, but make it so that someone who maybe either wasn't willing or maybe bounced off the structure of those previous games to get through it. And I think, like, that is what's so special about Elden Ring. And I'm excited to see what they do next. Like, I don't know what they're going to do next. I don't know if it's like another Elden Ring or if they go back for another game that's smaller, which I think they could absolutely do if they really wanted to. I think we'll see another game like this for sure, an Elden Ring 2 or something like that. But it's really put them into a place where they can do whatever they want. You know, it's so successful and so popular. that it's very cool to see this sort of like, I don't know, 15-year journey they've been on from like, what is this game, what is this Demon Souls thing to this? Like it is an insane journey they've gone on, and it's been crazy to see them develop and sort of like hone their skills the way that they have over these years. So yeah, that's going to do it for our first episode of Wayfinders. Our first deep in to this game. It was a big one. It was a big task for us to start out with, but we did it. I'm proud of us. I'm proud that we got through it. We're going to do another one, and we're going to pick a shorter game this time for what we're going to do. Something a little more digestible. Not that doing a shorter game would be very hard. I mean, we could literally do a 40-hour game. It would still be like a third of the length of the amount of time I put into this game. But we'll pick something. We'll announce that on the Discord and on the socials when we come to an agreement about what we're going to do. We originally talked about Cyberpunk, but I think that is a bad choice to follow up this, considering how long that game also is. So I think we should give ourselves a break and do something else. But yeah, that's going to do it. Please, if you've been listening to this, rate and review us on any podcasting platform of choice. If you're watching us on the video version, like the video, subscribe, ring that bell. It really, really helps with the videos and helps them grow and helps us get more viewers. Jake, is the name of your YouTube channel PlanetRedBeard? Is that the name of it?
It is, yes. Yeah, okay. PlanetRedBeard. I think it's 2 words. PlanetRedBeard. It might be 1 word. I'm not sure. I haven't got it in front of me, but probably 2 words. If
you search it, you'll find him. You'll find it. You'll hear the voice. You'll know that it's him. Check out his video essays. Yeah, we'll see you again soon. But until next time, thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you, Bobby.
And thank you to everybody who's been watching or listening. Until next time, be good to another. Later.